Your show on 560 QAM. To talk to Neil, call 567-0560. Toll free in Dade and Broward. Or pound 560 on your cell phone. The opinions of Neil, his guests, and callers do not necessarily represent those of the Weekly Broadcast Group, its staff, advertisers, or agencies. Now, here's Neil Rogers on 560 QAM.
It's Friday, you bastards.
Well, he's a king of the party, yeah, and he's the VIP. He's such a boy, but that out Gore, he's a hero to me. Well, he wants to keep them counting until they get it right. Don't hit the brakes, do what it takes, yeah, he's ready to fight. Oh, I wanna be like you. I wanna walk like you, talk like you, it's true. Yeah, Gore, like Pinocchio, I'm for sure. Let someday you'll be human too. I believe I am human. I have human emotions, unlike George W., who does not. Well, he's the king of the party, yeah, a Texas VIP. Turning worse to mush, that George Bush, he's the hero to me. Well, he wants to stop the counting, 'cause he's in the lead. He fried his brain on the party train with that wacky weed. Oh, I wanna be like you. I wanna walk like you, talk like you, it's true. Oh, hey, George Bush, all you need is just a little push, and you could be our leader, too.
Who the hell knows? 10:02 at 560 WQM. Happy Friday to you. Supreme Court's meeting, baby. The U.S. freaking Supreme Court, they're holding their meeting right now. In fact, Justice Rehnquist is holding up the swastika to begin the ceremonies. They're doing it. Are we going to hear it live?
No.
No. Damn it. That's a damn good thing, because we'd probably have to just open a pot and put it on the air. We'd be out of business today. How'd that poll come out yesterday, Neil? Do you support the legislature's plan to appoint 25 electors for Bush? 945 votes, a pretty damn impressive total, if you ask me. No, 683, 72.2%. Yes, 262, 27.7%. So in other words, almost 3/4 of this audience said, no, we're not buying that. We're not buying that game, that desperation game. Anyway, the court hearing is going on from now to 11:30 this morning, hour and a half. And anything that, I mean, we got it here. Here's, what's his name, Bob Franklin.
Talk a little bit, and a heavy police presence, if you happen to see.
And they got all the Bush assholes out there, all the protesters, they're out there waving their placards and carrying on. Bush is the winner, Bush is the winner. We stole it fair and square. They're carrying on. Probably brought them all in from FSU and from the camps. But at any rate, speaking of protests, there's a full-page ad in the newspaper this morning. How do you like that? In the Herald, no less. Full-page ad on 9B, sponsored by the AFL-CIO, no less. It said, let our voices be heard, let our votes be counted. This is America, count every vote. Thousands of us, citizens of Florida who went to the polls on November 7th, still don't have our votes counted. Voting is the most basic act of participation in our political process, but for citizens to participate, we must believe that our votes count and that our votes are counted. We invite all Florida citizens who care about their vote to join in a rally today at 4 p.m. at the Stephen Clark Government Center, 111 Northwest 1st Street. Join community leaders, clergy, elected officials, labor activists, and others showing in Florida and the country that we will not stand for any abuse let me say it again, for any abuse of or disrespect for our democracy. Poorly worded. We will show the nation that we will persist, that we must persist until every vote is counted. Red, white, and blue ribbons will be distributed as a symbol that our voices must be heard and our votes must be counted. Oh! Let me say it again, paid for by the AFL-CIO. So that's 4 o'clock this afternoon at the Stephen Clark Government Center, 111 Northwest 1st Street. And they're inviting everybody to come down and to do a peaceful thing there and show that they're mad as hell and not going to put up with this anymore. I got to tell you right now that if there really is anybody out there who believes, I've said this before and I'll say it again, even though some of you disagree, and as usual, I find it mind-boggling that anybody could disagree with,
oh, God!
At least on this. The idea that we can really ever sort this mess out. There's so much chicanery going on here that it's just beyond belief. There's a story on the front page of the Herald about the felons who voted. And then, of course, we already know that there are a lot of people who are inaccurately labeled as felons. based on the hit list from Catherine Harris, who were yanked off the voters' rolls, and then there were 4,000 of them didn't get to vote. There were 12,000 of them. And 8,000 of those actually went through the rigmarole of getting their names back on there, but 4,000 couldn't get back on, or didn't get back on, or didn't know how to do it. The overwhelming majority of those voters would have voted for Gore. However, they also come to find out that there were hundreds of felons who joined the turnout on Election Day. It's really interesting. The last paragraph of this story, it's a very long story. Duval County led the state. 243 felons cast illegal ballots. And it says 75% of those ballots were registered Democrats. Palm Beach County Election Supervisor Teresa Lepore ignored the state purge list after a well-publicized error that mistakenly identified thousands of Floridians guilty of misdemeanors as having felony convictions. She declined comment for this article. I can't imagine why. But, well, the most interesting story, and this is a new one. Every day there's new crap. Page 33A, they got this one buried. Why did they bury this in the Herald? Suit asks judge to toss ballots received after Election Day. 6 South Florida voters will ask a judge in Tallahassee to throw out 1,500 overseas absentee ballots in the state's presidential vote, contending in a lawsuit that elections officials counted them illegally because the ballots arrived after Election Day. The lawsuit, the latest formal contest of Florida's election, zeroes in on a state rule in effect since 1984 that provides a 10-day post-election day window for ballots to arrive from abroad and be counted. Lawyers for the group said their complaint will be filed today in Leon County Circuit Court. The plaintiffs, who include Miami lawyer Robert N. Harris, contend that the state's rule violates Florida and federal law as well as the U.S. Constitution. If the ballots were physically received after Election Day, they cannot be counted, said the lawyer representing the 6, Roger J. Bernstein, a New York litigator. It's a black and white question of law, he says. While disavowing any official ties to the Democratic Party or Vice President Al Gore's campaign, Bernstein and his Miami co-counsel Randy Weber said the suit, if successful, would likely turn the state vote in the Democrats' favor. Besides Harris, the plaintiffs include voters Jill Katz, Robin K. Adair, Marcel Del Prado, Jack J. Albuquerque, and Marion Albuquerque. They're suing Secretary of State Catherine Harris, Governor Jeb Bush, and 10 county canvassing boards where most of the overseas ballots that arrived after the election were supposed to have been counted. Statewide, those ballots added 745 votes to Bush's narrow lead in Florida. The 10 counties accounted for about 1,500 of the overseas ballots counted after Election Day and split about 2-1 in Bush's favor, said Bernstein. His contention closely coincides with court proceedings last week in a lawsuit by the GOP against 14 Florida canvassing boards that had tossed out scores of post-election day overseas ballots that didn't meet various requirements. A state judge in Tallahassee reportedly told lawyers during a hearing that he could find no legal basis for the 10-day window. Let me read that sentence again. A state judge in Tallahassee repeatedly told lawyers during a hearing that he could find no legal basis for the 10-day window. Leon County Circuit Judge L. Ralph Smith indicated he was unlikely to grant GOP lawyers' request for an order forcing the canvassing boards to reconsider the disqualified ballots. Some legal observers believe that Smith was considering tossing out all the late-arriving overseas ballots, but the GOP withdrew the suit after some of the counties relented and validated many of the discarded votes. Ron Lebasky, the general counsel for the State Association of Election Supervisors, who was sharply questioned by Smith, said yesterday he believes the 10-day rule is legally valid. A spokesman for Secretary Harris did not respond to a request for comment. The rule was enacted under a 1984 agreement with the U.S. Department of Justice, which sued the state because late-arriving ballots from overseas military personnel were not being counted, Lebasky said. No one has challenged it in 16 years. The rule was never made part of Florida election law, Lebasky said, and at least one state statute might conflict with it. That law, cited in the South Floridian suit, requires all absentee ballots to arrive in elections offices by 7 p.m. the day of the election and makes no allowance for late-arriving ballots. How do you like that? So there's another chigger in the woodpile. Black and white, matter of law. We got more goddamn suits going on. Anybody out there keep track of all that?
No.
I sure can't. Let's get Barbara Boxer on the phone to help us out. I can't keep track of this crap. Let me say it again. I listened yesterday. You know who else I listened to? Just to see what all the big hoopla was, I listened to Big Fat Ass there.
I was going to be right.
And all he was talking about was the fact that he had to go to San Jose or somewhere, Puerto Rico, I don't know, for some golf tournament for charity. And that, of course, if events dictate, I'll have to stop somewhere along the way and pop into a studio so I can be on. Like the whole process can't go on unless fat ass is on the air. And then after lunch at Mommy's, I was in the car and I turned over to your girlfriend for a couple of minutes. Shrill and hysterical. Shrill and hysterical. And kvetchy and annoying. In fact, I still have agita. So you enjoy it. Okay. 10 past 10 at 560 WQAM.
No portion of this program may be reproduced without the express written permission of WQAM DC Broadcast Group Incorporated.
Okay, whatever you say. 10:13 at 560 WQAM. Here's a great story from Newport News. Catherine Ortega was looking forward to eating a chicken dinner after a family outing Tuesday night. She ordered a box of fried wings from McDonald's and was putting them on plates for her 2 children when she found a chicken part that definitely wasn't a wing. I noticed that it had a beak and it had eyes, said Ortega. I screamed. The unusual piece of chicken turned out to be a fried chicken head. I didn't know you could get head at McDonald's. Ortega called the McDonald's on Warwick near Hickory Point Boulevard where she purchased the dinner and told the restaurant manager about it. She said the manager was pretty matter-of-fact. He said, just bring it back. We'll send it back to the company. Uh-huh. The manager told her she could have a refund or another box of wings, but Ortega said she'd lost her appetite for chicken. There's no way I wanted another chicken box, she said. She said she fixed grilled cheese sandwiches for her family. I'll probably cook at home from now on, she said. She said she was unable to sleep Tuesday night. I kept thinking about my children eating it, Ortega said. She said that if she just let her children dig in, her youngest child, who was 5 years old, probably would have bitten the head without looking at it. Well, I hate when that happens. Ortega isn't sure if she'll file a lawsuit, but she said that she's contacted the FDA for advice on handling the incident, and also trying to meet with McDonald's officials who want to know more about the matter and maybe slip her a few bucks under the table to dummy her up and prevent a lawsuit. How do you like that, huh? Get yourself some head at McDonald's. 5670560, pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon wireless line. Attorneys for Vice President Al Gore have long argued Palm Beach County officials use more restrictive standards when recounting disputed ballots, but on Thursday, the officials offered mathematical calculations to back up those claims, and we saw that yesterday with, Boyce. We already saw that. See, one of the big problems was these chads that build up under the punch holes. Just like emptying an ashtray. If you keep smoking cigarettes all day and say you have like 5 people in the car smoking, chain smoking, and you don't empty the ashtray out, pretty soon it's going to be spilling all over the goddamn floor and you can't jam any more in the ashtray. Well, it's the same thing with the chads that build up under the punch holes. So all you people that want to laugh at these so-called dimpled ballots or pregnant chads, the reason that those happen is because people can't stick it all the way through, which again, you have to hate when that happens. They keep probing and pushing and sticking, but they can't put it all the way through because of Chad buildup. In fact, I got a picture of one guy in here, Emmett Patrick Blake, who looks certainly strong enough to shove it all the way through, although he is a Delray Beach nurse, it says. But it says he had so much difficulty voting that he asked for a new ballot and different voting machine and then stayed behind to watch others to see what the hanky-panky was going on. It says Chad can pile up enough to block a vote from registering. Like an ashtray, the drawer must be emptied quite often. He says, if I were the judge in the case, I'd be asking what procedures were used for cleaning and preparing the machines prior to the election to make sure there was no accumulation of Chad. And I'll say it again, all the dimpled ballots in that recount in that Texas election that the Republican requested, every single one of the dimpled ballots was counted. How do you like that, huh? And he still lost, but they were all counted. Just mention that in passing. Here's a call in Hallandale. Hello.
Yeah, I'm at McDonald's. I take a 6-piece chicken McHead.
McHead.
Listen, I was watching.
I bet your brother probably be eating there a lot more often if he had that new McHead.
McHead, he'd be there. Anyway, I was watching the news. How sick is it? Oh, we're following the actual truck. Oh my God, the truck.
Yeah, but you know, this was an Isuzu truck today. We didn't have the old riot truck.
Oh my God, I think, you know that truck, I think it's about 8 miles to the gallon, every angle on it. Jesus Christ,
yeah.
Is that sick or what?
Very sick.
Oh my God, God help us. Neil?
Yes?
I'd like to say hello to Big Dick over at Marco Island.
Okay.
So, Big Dick, what's up, dude?
Okay. 567. What's going on here today? You know, something strange coming to work this morning. I thought it was a holiday or something. There was no traffic on 595. Everybody gone? What the hell happened here all of a sudden? Maybe they just all bailed out. When in doubt, they bailed out. In fact, maybe they just want to avoid that weekend at camp that they're hearing where some of us might get. Yeah. Free weekend at camp, whether you want to go or not. 5, 6, 7. Are these lines working today? What the hell's going on here this morning? This is very bizarre. I think we'd be out of here. Everybody left town. Here's Fort Myers. Hello.
Yeah, Neil, how you doing?
Okay.
Hey, listen, about that build-up of chads, that doesn't happen, guy. It doesn't operate on the same type of thing as, like your 3-hole punch. I would figure that if every registered voter voted, punched every button, I mean, it falls into a bin there, into a bin. There's
but the bin is only, no, you're wrong. It's only deep enough to handle so many, and then afterward it piles up. It's only a certain depth.
No, sir, you're wrong.
No, I'm not wrong. It's right here. There's a whole article about it, and the elections people are agreeing with that. So you can call up any radio show and make some kind of stupid asinine statement, tell me I'm wrong, but I'm not wrong. It's right there in black and the purple, asshole. Go pick your nose some more over there in Fort Myers, okay, and leave us alone over here. We got problems. No, you're wrong. It falls into the well, yeah, like the pussy in the well. We know. 567-0560. Pound 560 on the AT&T. Look at all these Hitler Youth. Oh, there we got a couple of people with Gore Lieberman. Look at that. Under the age of 100. Gore Lieberman signs, and then there's the Sir Loserman signs next to them there in Tallahassee, and they're all marching and carrying on and making a lot of noise while this poor bastard...
If you could look around and you could see from some of the other positions...
Yeah, shut them all up already, okay? Stuff something in their mouth. Stuff a chicken head in their mouth. God. Here's a mobile in West Palm Beach. Hello?
How you doing, Neil?
Okay.
Listen, if you want all these dimpled ballots to be counted, do you agree with a statewide recount, just to make sure? Because why just count the ones in the Democratic
That's
county?
what I said right from the beginning.
Okay, so then...
Well, how come the Bush people didn't want to do that?
Well, I agree with you.
You want to know why they didn't want to do it?
Why is that?
Because they know they lost. That's why. Make no mistake about it. I don't care who you voted for. It's a free country, at least as of the moment, somewhat free. Even for a police state, but you can be for whoever you want, but the fact is, everybody who wants to be even a little bit honest about it knows that Al Gore won this state and won the election. That's why they continue fighting the way that they're fighting, because they don't want to have it stolen away from them right in broad daylight. They know they won the goddamn thing. And they keep asking the obvious question, and they never get an answer. What could possibly be wrong with counting every vote? Why could anybody who really wants a fair election be opposed to that? Well, they counted and recounted. Yeah, but there's a lot of ballots that never were counted the first time. Yeah, but they just keep counting and recounting until they get a number they like. No, the fact is that you got a number that you like, and you want to shut it off in the middle of the 8th inning or whatever inning it is. That's the deal. And that's why they're petrified. That's why they're peeing in their pants. That's why they're schmitting all kinds of purple and technicolor. Because they're afraid that this election will... And there's Jeb yesterday. Did you see the comment that he made? I almost schmit my pants. When they were asking him about, would he sign if the legislature, which are going to meet Tuesday and put up this phony slate of electors, would he sign the bill if they found it necessary to pass a new piece of legislation? Would he sign it? And he says, oh, well, the Democrats want me to abandon my family. I hate to break the news to you, sir. You're not just, in the eyes of the law, the brother of the governor of Texas. You're supposed to be the governor of the state of Florida. They want him to abandon his family, which was code for saying, hey, guess what? My name is Bush, and I'll do whatever the hell it takes to make sure that my brother gets in. That's exactly what he was saying, and make no mistake about that. Here's Fort Lauderdale. Hello.
Oh, Neil, how you doing?
Okay.
You just stole my thunder. I was just going to tell you that, I don't know if you watched the news yesterday, but Jeb was on there. Oh, yeah, they want me to leave my brother and let him do whatever he wants.
Yeah, abandon his family.
Yeah, that's all I had, but I just want to let people know that this thing's it's a fix.
Okay, watch for the Chad, pal. Oh, speaking of fix, that's our poll question today and for the weekend. This should get some response. Here's today's poll question on neilrogers.com. This election in Florida was... 3 choices. As honest as any other state, flawed but only by accidental events, or fixed. Which of those 3 do you choose? This election in Florida was as honest as any other state, flawed but only by accidental events, or fixed. 567-0560, pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon wireless line. And for anybody out there who thinks that at 11:30 after the U.S. Supreme Court is still hearing these oral arguments, can we say oral?
No.
These arguments, that they're going to have a decision for you, forget about it. They'll have a decision like maybe Monday, Tuesday, whenever they get around. Whenever they pull that twisted cross out of William Rehnquist's hand. Whenever they get that joint out of Clarence Thomas's puss. Here's the mobile in Fort Lauderdale. Hello.
Neil.
Yes, sir.
How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Quick question. Based on your theory about the backup of the Chad, if that's true, then
It's not my theory. It's not a theory.
Well, let me ask you a question. If that's the case, then why would the punch cards be completely pushed through the whole card, and then it wouldn't be able to be pushed through the presidency?
Because that's the well that's full of Chad.
Right.
I'm sorry?
Because wherever the dimple is, that's the well that's full. That's
Okay,
the one that's
so in other
full.
words, what you're saying is it's going to build up only under the presidency, but not under the section of the rest of the card.
It's gonna-
That doesn't make sense.
Don't you well, let me ask you this. Which area do you think is going to get the most votes?
Neil?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Which part of the ballot do you think in a presidential election is going to get the most votes in most precincts?
The whole card's going to get voted on.
Okay, did you hear the question?
No, because my car phone. Try one
Okay,
more
well,
time.
get a new phone. Get a new phone. Have the Republicans buy you one and call us back. See, don't confuse these people with the facts. They had pictures of it. It was either yesterday or the day before. They actually had photographs of it that show the buildup of the Chad underneath where the guy you're supposed to punch the holes.
Whichever hole gets punched the most, that's how it's going to get full first.
It says Chad can pile up enough to block a vote from registering, says Douglas W. Jones, a computer science professor who chairs the Iowa Board of Examiners of Voting Machines and Electronic Voting Systems. Like an ashtray, the drawer must be emptied quite often. And it goes on to talk about how many Chads it can handle before they build up, but the fact is that in very heavy precincts where there are a lot of voters, and maybe the less educated voters, maybe that's all they're going to vote for as president. As opposed to this cockamamie math, this fuzzy math that some people keep peddling us, that, oh yeah, everybody and their brother, they're certainly going to vote for president, or the other way around. They're going to vote for all these other things, but we're not surprised that so many people don't vote for president. Right. And the big story on the front page of the newspaper today in the Sun Sentinel, minority and senior voters are most rejected. A third of all the disqualified votes, 22,807 in all in Palm Beach County, were concentrated in mostly black zones where at least 8% of the votes for president went uncounted. Well, that was in Broward, Dade, and Palm Beach. 8%. Anybody believe in that? No. And now we have to argue. Here's the guy. What was this guy's title? He's a computer science professor who chairs the Iowa Board of Examiners of Voting Machines and Electronic Voting Systems. He's what they call an expert.
Oh, he's a paid-off Democrat.
Yeah, that's right. He don't know what he's talking about. The guy from Fort Myers, he knew his crap.
And those black voters, they're animals anyway, so
let him lose their vote. 1026 at 560 QAM.
This is 560 QAM.
It's Friday, you bastard.
This is the year that I'm gonna get smart, yeah. The holiday frenzy has already started. Think you're ever gonna see my face in the crowd? Pushing and shoving, don't think so, pal. Oh, not on your life. Ain't gonna be no store. That's what my computer's here for. Those are lazy ass ways shop online. Not on your life. Well, that budget is never. Now I don't have to hit a more lever. I can click a mouse and hear the sign. Not on your life.
1031 at 560 WQM. Right on the front page of the Sun Sentinel for that jackass in Fort Myers. Here's an article about minority and senior votes are most rejected. I just got through giving you the statistics. About 8% of the votes for president uncounted in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. 8% of the votes, mostly in black zones. says voters interviewed in the problem districts described two distinct sources of difficulty. A voter registration drive by civil rights groups sent many new and experienced or non-English speaking voters to the polls. Some said they thought they needed to punch holes for both the president and his running mate. But perhaps more significantly for the court battles, voters in some areas described trying to stab the number for Gore with their stylus and meeting physical resistance, most likely from the day's accumulation of Chad. Gore's staff said that this is a key reason why the vice president continues to fight in court for the pregnant and dimpled Chads to be counted. Barnett Weems, a poll clerk for precincts 263 and 266 in Miami, said she tried to shake out the Chad every few hours, although she did have one machine become clogged beyond repair. It might have happened once or twice because some booths do get used more than other ones, she said. In Precinct 263, Laurel Park Elementary School, 98% of all presidential votes counted were cast for Gore. Just over 10% of the votes cast were disqualified, and 3.5% of all voters showed no vote for president, although other races were registered. Yvette McLeod, 39, a safety engineer for Metro-Dade, had trouble making her PIN go through at Precinct 263 by 8:30 in the morning. You couldn't get it to go in, she said. I forced it. It took me 4 tries to get it. When McLeod returned home later that day, she told her neighbors her friend Margie Atkins had the same problem, so did her father and her twin brother. Everybody was scratching their heads, wondering if their PIN actually went through. The numbers bolster black civil rights activists' worst suspicions of what happened to minority neighbors on Election Day. How do you like that? But I just made it up. See? I just made it up. Don't confuse these Republicans and that jackass over there in Fort Myers. Don't confuse them with the facts, because they stole it fair and square. They got the inside dope from Chad Everett. Here's a mobile in Fort Lauderdale. Hello.
Yes, Neil.
Yes, sir.
Front page of the New York Times this morning. Miami mayor's role, a riddle in decision to halt recount.
Uh-huh.
In the hours before and after Miami-Dade County's 10 recounts was halted last week, Democrats and Republicans believe that one man had the power to determine its fate, Alex Pinellas, the 38-year-old Democratic mayor of Miami-Dade County, rising star of South Florida politics.
Oh, yeah.
Last Tuesday, as the county's hand recount racked up dozens of new votes for Vice President Al Gore, the mayor had lunch at the Governor's Club in Tallahassee with the Republican state legislature. Later, he met with other Republican lawmakers who are significant to Mr. Pinellas because Florida's legislature will draw new congressional districts in 2002, and Mr. Pinellas, political observers say, has hopes of running for Congress as a Republican. The next day, the 3 members of the Dade County Canvassing Board, one of whom works for Mr. Pinellas, voted to stop the manual recount and canceled its plans to review the 10,750 ballots that voting machines said had no presidential preference. The vote came during the Florida Supreme Court's ruling that recounts could go forward. Not long afterwards, Mr. Gore called Mr. Pinellas and asked for his help in reversing the board's decision, according to Mark Fabini, the Gore campaign communications director. The Democrats who are using the events in Dade County as a central argument in their court case privately suggest that Mr. Pinellas double-crossed them. They say he either influenced the board's decision or, through inaction, created the political room for canvassers to stop the hand count. We thought he was on our team, said a senior Democratic official who spoke on conditions of autonomy.
Anonymity, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The article goes on to say that Mr. Pinellas, when the board reversed field again on November 22nd and stopped counting in a very damaging moment for Mr. Gore, Mr. Pinellas was on the sidelines. Democratic suspicions were quickly aroused. While Democrats had made unruly Republican protests outside the board's meeting room, the center of their lawsuit, those who know Miami politics, where ethnicity is usually more important than party affiliation, look for other explanations, motives. The whole community is very suspicious of what happened surrounding the decision to close down the recount, said Representative Carrie Meeks. The Democrats from Miami-Dade County, people are suspect because wouldn't you be if there were 10,700 votes that were not counted? The Democrats clearly believe Mr. Pinellas is an ally, and they blamed his inaction at the critical moment on his ties to Republican politicians here, including Representative Lincoln Diaz-Balart and Ileana Ross-Lederman.
Oh, my God. There you go.
Who led Mr. Bush's attack on the Florida recount.
Thanks for the bad news, pal.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pinga Pequena, recall. Newsweek magazine, in line with what he was just talking about when they stopped the vote in Dade, the recount. County Judge Miriam Lair was also reluctant to forge ahead. Of course, they talked about how David Leahy had fainted in the previous 1985. He passed out. But anyway, she was reluctant to forge ahead. An Orthodox Jew, she had, according to county officials, complained about having to work on the Jewish Sabbath. She may have felt other pressures as well. Though officially nonpartisan, she is married to a Republican activist, Miami lawyer Bruce Lear, who 2 months ago was appointed to the Dade County Republican Executive Committee. How do you like that? And it goes on at great length in this week's Newsweek, which I have in my hand right now, the December 4th issue, about the crap about all these imported Ojan Provocateur Goyim that were brought in there to stir the crap up. In fact, where's the one page where it shows this poor? Here it is. Pushing and shoving, waving arms and pumping fists, about 30 or 40 clean-cut-looking young Republicans poured into the 19th floor reception area shouting, "Let us in, stop the count, stop the fraud." They banged on the double doors of the ballot counting room. Joe Geller, the Democratic chairman of Miami-Dade, had the bad timing to arrive on the 19th floor at 10 a.m. just as tempers were flaring. Geller wanted to pick up a sample ballot to show an expert witness who planned to testify in the coming court challenges. Geller slid the sample ballot into his pocket. A woman suddenly yelled at the top of her lungs, "He stole a ballot!" Demonstrators surrounded Geller and began jostling him. The Democratic boss fled down the elevator. It was classic brown shirt tactics, he told Newsweek. It was totally a deliberate thing. How else did they know I was a lawyer? It was designed to intimidate people. This is what goes on in Dade County under the guise of an election, under the guise of counting votes, under the guise of democracy. 21 before 11 at 560 QAM.
This is 560 QAM. The Neil Rogers Show. Sports Radio 560 QAM.
What are you saying?
Backstreet Boys tickets go on sale tomorrow. Any interest?
Any interest in what?
In going? You?
Sure. Anyway, here's the Roger Cossack.
And then perhaps maybe us. Now Frank,
news for the Bush people at the U.S. Supreme Court.
I only heard Ted Olson's argument. Arguments are going on right now. The other side will be speaking soon. And, you know, as I say, and Greta says, and all lawyers say, you know, you cannot glean too much from the questions that the judges ask. But from what they ask, they seem to be very, very concerned about their role and whether or not they should be playing a role in this at all. And I thought Justice Ginsburg's remark about, don't we defer to the highest court of the land whenever we should, I thought that may be pretty telling.
Roger, yesterday in their reply brief, the one filed yesterday, the Gore campaign all but implored these justices to stay away from the issue of the role of the Florida Legislature.
Roger Cossack, who was inside the Supreme Court, says that repeatedly all of the questions, Ted Olson was making the argument for the Bush people,
yes,
repeatedly asking why should we be hearing this and why shouldn't this be up to the Florida Supreme Court and the Florida Legislature, and then if there's a problem after that up to the Congress, why are we hearing this? All of it, not just the liberal judges, but all the justices asking the same question.
That has not, there was no remarks made about the special session of the federal, of the Florida Legislature.
All right, let me come back to something else you said a moment ago that you and Greta point out. A lot of times you can't really tell from the questioning where the justices are coming from. But would you characterize their questioning as harsh or skeptical or merely inquisitive?
You know, I would say clearly inquisitive, Frank. There was no rancor, there was no, antagonism, but there certainly was a question of asking Olson to explain why the federal judiciary should be involved in this case at this time. Also the question of the issue of deferring to the Florida Supreme Court. Isn't this Florida law? Isn't this what the Florida Supreme Court? Yes, they reconciled these two statutes. Perhaps we don't like the way they reconciled these two statutes. Perhaps we don't agree with it. But isn't this something that the Florida Supreme Court should be doing? Should we, the federal judiciary, be involving ourselves with the Florida Supreme Court? Even if we don't like it, it really is a Florida issue. And then they pointed out, however, that Congress has set out another scheme as part of the scheme that if there is a problem, that eventually it's Congress who decides, with the hint that if Congress doesn't do it right, perhaps then there's a federal question, and then the Supreme Court could be involved.
And Roger, as you were looking around inside that incredible courtroom today and reading the faces and the body language of some of the others, and I'm thinking of Lawrence Tribe, who you didn't hear but who will be arguing for the Gore campaign. Any sense, any reactions? Where did he write? Where did he jot down something to rebut later?
No, there was great note-taking being done by all. The lawyers were too busy, I'm sure, thinking about their own moment in the sun to be looking at what else is happening. There was one, I thought, interesting moment when Ted Olson, who, as I say, was being peppered with questions, and once was being asked a question by Justice Ginsburg, looked up and began to answer and said, Justice Ginsburg. And I thought, oh boy, he's having a tough time up there, but let me assure you that he has acquitted himself very well.
All right, Roger Cotton.
Okay, there you go. So far, it's not looking too good for the Bush lawsuit with the U.S. Supreme Court. They're saying, what are you coming to us for, jackass? But anyway, don't confuse them with the facts. Here's Hollywood. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I want to deal with the issue of taking votes away from the veterans.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got Colin Powell. Has anybody asked him what he thinks about this?
What he thinks about what?
About trying to steal votes away from the veterans. He's,
well, what does that mean, taking votes away from the veterans? What does that mean?
They had on TV yesterday these three lawyers that are filing a suit that they want to erase all the votes.
No, they want to erase the votes that came in after the deadline because it's not legal.
Well...
And not only then, they were, you keep saying veterans. We're not talking about veterans. We're talking about people who are active in the military right now.
Oh, yes,
and also the overseas ballots. They don't distinguish. In other words, when those ballots come in, they don't identify whether they're from military, whether they're from tourists, whether they're from people who live snowbirds part of the year in other countries. They're overseas ballots.
Well, I think that when you have a soldier in a far-off land and they're trying to tell them that... They're not going to count their vote because someone didn't put a stamp on it or something.
No, this isn't what the lawsuit about. It's not about somebody not putting a stamp on it. This is about whether it came in by election day. That's what the law says.
Well, I hope that they put a light on all the problems.
In other words, what you're saying is that if somebody's in the military and they're overseas and their vote comes in late, it should be counted. But if somebody's living over, say, in France or in Israel or somewhere and their vote comes in late, it shouldn't be?
Well, no.
What are you saying?
I misunderstand some of it, but they were saying that votes that come in 10 days after the votes are counted.
Yeah, that's right. They were counted, but that's what's being challenged in court because, as I read from the article from the Herald this morning, it says that the rule was never made law and it conflicts with at least one state statute, and the lawyers who are filing the lawsuit say it's a black and white question of law. If the ballots were physically received after Election Day, they cannot be counted.
Well, I think that whole issue with gathering the votes from the guys overseas should be put more importance onto it. From what I've read.
So, in other words, if you're in the military, your vote is more important than mine. Well, you know what? Blow it out your ass. That's what I say to you. These are the same people that are arguing about the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment and about the recounts are bad because they discriminate and it makes one person's vote more important than the other. And these are the same people that say, but if you're in the military, because we know the odds are probably you're going to vote for us, then your vote is more important. And I say to you, okay, blow it out your ass. These people don't understand the whole basic concept of one person, one vote in this goddamn country. You don't get it. Whether it's Shlomi Shapiro over there who's in Israel, whether it's Eddie Jackowitz who's over there in Amsterdam having a good time, or somebody in the military, whoever it is, the law is the law. And let me say it again, it was your Secretary of Bush. She was the one who directed every one of the 67 counties in this state with a written directive that if the absentee overseas ballots didn't have stamps, if they weren't didn't arrive on time, and if they didn't have a postmark, they weren't to be counted. That was a directive from her.
No, come on, it's a Democratic plot.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Here's Coral Springs. Hello.
Yeah, let me tell you something about these veterans. There were a lot of veterans in Palm Beach County who didn't get their votes counted either.
I said that the other day. That's right. They fought, maybe, who knows, maybe WW1 they fought in. Who knows?
Yeah, they fought the wrong war, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I was born and raised in Chicago politics, and if any of these yuppies came into... the next time any of these Republican yuppies come in and start banging down the doors, we're going to get a bunch of guys to start banging them down. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen... I've never seen such liberal. We have such Democratic weenies down here. It's unbelievable. The local Democratic organizations down here suck, and that's been part of the problem.
Okay, well, thank God we got Mayor Pinga Pequena. It's pretty obvious where he came out on this. Weren't we just talking about this the other day? All these make-believe Democrats still here in the Deep South? All these people masquerading as Democrats, but really being Republicans like Bob Crawford and Mayor Pinga Pequena and so many of the others? And Jim Noggle in Fort Lauderdale? And the list goes on and on. Who?
Teresa Lepore.
Teresa Lepore in Palm Beach County. Republicans in drag. You're not fooling us, Mayor Pinga Pequena. You're the chigger in the woodpile. That comes as no surprise to me. None. You know, when you talk about fixed elections, and I don't care what anybody says to me because I've been here a long time. I've been here 25 years. Now I remember the election on the Metro Rail. The election on the Metro Rail, which they spent a fortune trying to put over, and of course the Herald was a participant as they usually are. They were a party of that whole fraud and masquerade, trying to brainwash the public and put that over on us. And they were losing, and the election as usual in Dade County, the votes were very slow, and it went on and dragged on and on till the wee hours. And then very late at night they said, well, we have the last precincts coming in from Homestead. Now let me ask you this, does the Metro Rail run anywhere near Homestead? No. Is there any reason why anybody in Homestead would want to pay tax money to build a train to nowhere that doesn't serve them in any way, shape, or form? No. But voila, just like a miracle, it passed. Then, of course, we've had a series of elections where if you're for something, you vote no. If you're against it, you vote yes. Purposely done to confuse the electorate. The most classic example being after Mayor Pinga Pequena got elected, and in large part on his pledge to the public that he wasn't going to be a partner with Mickey Harrison and spend any of your tax dollars to build a billionaire goddamn arena downtown. Mayor Pinga Pequena gets elected, and all of a sudden, hey, bingo! We have another special election here on whether or not you people want this goddamn white elephant. And it's the same thing. If you're for it, you vote no. If you're against it, you vote yes. And I remember, again, very specifically, watching the election night, and all through the evening, it was losing like 2-1. And all of a sudden, later on, late in the night, it turned around. Completely turned around. Whatever in other words, like I'm saying, if it was 100,000 for and 50,000 against, now all of a sudden it was 300,000, you see what I'm saying? The other way around. And it passed. And there's that, and from now until the end of time, until they tear that building down someday, you're going to have to wind up paying tax dollars in Dade County for the upkeep on that building. Where there are at best 7,000-8,000 people most nights. And where they've had to do the same thing in the upper deck. I mean, at least in the Mac Arena, we're not drawing any people there in the Panther games. But at least we haven't had to close off any of the seats. They've done this is a town, to talk about Bush League, you go to the Joe Robbie Stadium, or PP Park, or whatever you want to call it, and during baseball season, they have to put that gray crap that they do over the seats in the upper deck to close it down. And they put that gray, whatever you want to call it, schmutz. And now they do the same thing and not only that, but I'm reading in the paper this morning that a lot of seats that were $60 and $80 seats, now they're like $33 seats for the Heat games. In that big, spacious, wonderful place. That's a total, according to what everybody tells me, an embarrassment and a joke that we had to build for Mickey Harrison. Because what you got in this town, ladies and gentlemen, are partners in crime. That's what you've got. Mayor Pinga Pequena and Mickey Harrison and a bunch of other goddamn grave robbers, and don't ever kid yourself. Because the little people in this town don't count for nothing. You haven't got a chance. And everybody gets run around by the nose, and every time, just like with the alien business, and it's the same suspects, Armando Gutierrez and all these other goddamn grave robbers, come out there dragging these people around, calling the shots. Ramon Saul Sanchez, Lincoln Diaz, Bullard, Ileana Gross, Rosanna Dana. I'll say it again. It's like the flamingos at Hialeah. You ever seen that? The guy with the whistle? The guy has a whistle, and when it's feeding time, guy goes out there, blows the whistle, and all the flamingos line up, and they goose step along because they know they're going to get fed. And that's how it is in Dade County. We want to have an orchestrated song and a dance, get everybody whipped up to a frenzy. Ramon Saul Sanchez, they get going on the goddamn Bay of Biscayne Bay, whatever the hell it used to be called, till I just changed it. They get the goddamn boats going with their little caravan. They get everybody in the streets. They get the cars going to block the roads. And hey, here we go. Just wait for me to whistle. Yeah. Whistle while you jerk. Anyway, moving right along. Here's Plantation. Hello.
Hello, Neil.
Yes, sir.
Good day, eh?
Good day, eh?
Did you notice there was an election in Canada?
Yes, I noticed that they had one recount in some little part of Quebec, one little, whatever they call those up there. They're not counties, whatever they call them.
Provinces, yeah.
No, not a province, in one little, like what the equivalent of a county in Quebec. But other than that, everything went smoothly, and that frog got back in again, no problem.
Constituency, is that it?
Oh, I see that Mayor Mel is having some problems up there in Toronto.
Yeah, right.
You see that getting blackmailed by a couple of guys? He had an affair 80 million years ago.
Yeah.
Now he's getting blackmailed, poor Mayor Mel.
But anyway, last week I think you were playing a lot of the doucheland, Uber Alleys, that stirring music that...
Yeah.
There we go. Now I need to practice goose-stepping around because I think we're all going to have to fall in.
Just like those flamingos, baby. Just wait for them to whistle. How's that poll coming? I'm glad you asked. The election in Florida was, in your opinion, we got 67 votes so far, not exactly steering. Well, you know, that's because nobody's listening. They're all busy watching CNN. I understand that. Or Fox, God forbid, the fascist news network. 72 votes, like I said. The election in Florida was fixed, say 51 people, 71%. As honest as any other state, 11, or 15.2%. Flawed, but only by accidental events, 10 people, 13.8%. So far, 71% of this audience says this election was freaking fixed.
This is 560 QAM. Sports Radio 560 WQAM Miami, Fort Lauderdale. A Beasley Broadcast Group station. WQAM.com for the world. They'll hate you.
Just in time for the holidays, the most unusual Christmas album ever. Oprah Winfrey burps the Christmas classics. Listen to Oprah pass gas at Christmas Mass. Oprah Winfrey burps the Christmas classics. Available in the freezer section at Ralph's.
It's 11 o'clock right on the nose here at 560 WQM. Another 30 minutes in the oral arguments before the Supreme Court, and then you can be sure Roger Cossack's going to come back out on CNN and go up, like that, and we'll put it on. Politicians on, this is part of the New York Times article the guy was reading from before. Politicians on both sides here say Mr. Pinellas was subjected to the most intensive lobbying efforts. Raul Martinez, the Democratic mayor of Hialeah, said he spoke with Mr. Pinga Pequena shortly after the recount was halted. He sounded like he was under pressure, Mr. Martinez said. He sounded scared. And it goes on and on and on at great length, many, many, many pages. Somebody, it sounds to me like here, was made an offer that they couldn't refuse. Isn't that what it sounds like?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. 5670560, pound 560 on the AT&T line. Here's Miami. Hello.
How you doing, Neil?
Okay.
You know what the word for Pinellas is? He's a political opportunist. He's always looking. He's made plans from the beginning of his political career to become senator and then work his way up to governor, and eventually he said he wanted to be the first Hispanic president.
Uh-huh, yeah.
But
he couldn't get to be president of the Kiwanis Club.
Yeah, hopefully. Neil, you know what this feels like, all the stuff that's going on, you know, when you're about to get a cold and you can feel your body changing, you know, the fever and the tickle in your throat.
Right.
That's how I feel about all this that's going on.
You sound like it.
Well, you know that it's coming and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
You know.
Squirt, squirt. Uh-huh.
I just feel real bad about all this.
Oh, okay, well,
is that article in the Newsweek is the one that says that all those Republicans last week were imported down here?
Yeah.
Given plane tickets and meal money?
Yeah.
That's the article?
That's the one.
Okay.
And it also says, have a great life. It also says they were handed placards to wave, T-shirts to wear, the Sore Loserman T-shirts, and they were actually led in chants. They practiced it. Stop the fix! Stop the fix! Like, why should you have to practice that? Yeah. Count their votes. Let us in. Stop the whatever they were yelling. How do you like that? All orchestrated by the brown shirts, the fascists. Here's Tamarack. Hello.
Neil?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I got a chicken head story for you.
Yeah.
We're eating in our favorite Chinese restaurant. Both of us ordered the hot sour soup. And while I got the soup on the level, right to my mouth, all of a sudden I see a hair.
Oh.
I take out the hair. It's a palmetto.
Palmetto bug, yeah.
And I lay it on the table, and the boss comes over. He's very sorry. But then the kicker is the waiter comes over and says, "Can I give you wonton soup instead?"
Yeah.
We both got up and walked out.
That's where the chicken head was in the wonton soup. You missed out.
That's all I got to say.
Okay, thanks for the good news. Okay. Come on, let's go get some McHead. 567-0560, pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon wireless line. 102 votes on that poll. The election in Florida was fixed. Oh, no. 72.5% of you think it was fixed, 74 out of 102. 14 people say, oh, as honest as any other state, and 14 said, oh, it was flawed, but only by accident. Here's Lighthouse Point. Hello.
Please, you're ridiculous.
Okay, thanks. Please, you're ridiculous.
Well, he told you.
Yeah, I guess he sure gave it to me. Yeah, I'm being ridiculous. There's another emotional cripple out there that can't handle the truth. 567-0560. Thanks for your very compelling argument, by the way, for whatever it was you were arguing for. Do we know what it was?
No.
It was very compelling. In fact, too bad you're not up there arguing before the Supreme Court. Here's Coral Springs. Hello.
Hi, Neil. How you doing?
Okay.
Look, did you hear about this business that's going on in Seminole and especially Martin counties?
Yes, we talked about it ad nauseum, yeah.
With where they actually took the votes home?
Right.
And the Democratic votes would, like, put aside?
Right. They were not put aside. They were Schmidt-Can. They were tossed.
Schmidt-Can, yeah. And this is all. I mean, it's in the paper, but I don't see anybody going to the court or making.
Well, it's in Leon County right now. Before that black lady judge, whatever the hell her name is, it's in court right now up there. The judge, Nikki Clark.
That gets me excited.
Well, then watch over the weekend. You'll be real excited. Yeah, we got some good stuff coming up this weekend. Like tomorrow morning, the hanging judge up there, that good old boy, Judge, I can't think of what his name is. Begins with an N. The bald-headed, the Yahoo guy. He's great. But anyway, tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, I believe, is that because the ballots are up there. Well, I guess the ones from Dade County aren't up there yet. How come we're seeing Roger Concept, but we're not seeing that goddamn caravan with that Isuzu?
Finally, isn't this something that should, if there is a problem, end up in Congress rather than with us, perhaps later on us?
Now, Roger, we should remind our viewers that what you heard, we will be hearing very shortly after the overall arguments are over, because for the first time we're going to have audio cassettes produced almost immediately upon the conclusion of this. They'll be replayed, and we'll be replaying them here on CNN. Roger, in what you heard, a lot of technical, very highly legalistic language and questioning?
Well, yes, but not so much so that it was, it felt like, I don't know, I'd read the brief, so I knew what was coming, and I knew what the issues were, and the notion of having these judges or justices immediately start talking about the federal question is something that the Gore team has raised in its defense, and clearly that was something that I'm sure Mr. Olson knew that he was going to have to discuss, as well as, what the proper remedy is. Their argument is basically, look, what happened here was Florida changed the rules. The state Supreme Court changed the rules after the election. That the election was one way, then after the election was over, they changed the rules. Obviously, you can't do that. Obviously, under their theory, you can't do that. It's a federal question. It may perhaps even rob voters of their ability to vote and have their vote counted. So this issue of is it a federal question, and if it isn't, then what is the United States Supreme Court doing right now? By hearing it, we knew it was going to come up, and it was couched sometimes technically in terms of what the statute requires, and sometimes in hypotheticals. The one question I think Justice Kennedy may have asked, he said, look, suppose there's a statutory scheme where the government says, we'll give you money for highways if you promise to lower the speed limit to 50 miles an hour. Well, what are we supposed to do if in fact they don't lower the speed limit to 50 miles an hour? I mean, does the United States Supreme Court step in at that stage? And those were the kinds of questions, I suppose, more hypothetical kinds of questions, but all going to the same thing of, is this the time for us to be here? Is there a federal question that's been presented? And if there is, what is the remedy? Is it us that should be involved later on down the road, or is it Congress?
And the most fascinating part and hypocritical part, as usual, about the whole thing is these are the states' rights champions that are there arguing in the U.S. Supreme Court, trying to overthrow a ruling by the state Supreme Court because they didn't like it. How do you like that? So they trust the people, but when it comes to counting votes, they trust machines better. And they trust states' rights, but when they get a ruling that they don't like, then they go to the federal government. Wasn't it the same Bush that was up there arguing about all the bitterness and divisiveness, and the federal government is too big in Washington, D.C., and he kept saying it without the G, of course, Washington. Yeah. And maybe somebody will show him where it is on the map. Wow. Here's Fort Myers. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, sir?
Louis.
Yeah, huh? Fort Myers, Fort Myers. Yeah, that's what that was. 567-0560, pound 560 on the AT&T. That was Mayor Pinga Pequeña's boyfriend. I've heard that voice before. Moaning in that dark room in Amsterdam, right behind Al Goldstein. I've heard that. You're not fooling us, sweetheart. 8 minutes after 11 at 560 WQS.
This is a bunch of hooey. Good morning. This is Vice President Al Gore. I believe you should know counting has always been an important part of my life. Why, I have always counted things over and over until I get a number I like. For example, on Christmas Day, I would count my presents till the aggregate total reached 23. On my birthday, I would count the candles on my cake, so each year they totaled 22. That's the year I lost my Cherry. Cherry was my dog, and I loved him. So please, understand I am upset over the recent criticism leveled against me regarding this election. I have hired the nation's premier counter to assist in this election process, and his work has already begun. 2,910,847 votes for Gore. We'll get to the bottom of this. Me and the count. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Al Gore.
11:13 at 560 WQAM. Yeah, I think we're going to carry that thing. What are you smiling about? We're not going to have any audience if we don't carry that when they play the audio tapes. Inquiring minds want to know, don't you think?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have to interrupt to get the commercials in, but the public wants to hear this crap. Here's Perrine. Hello.
Hey, Neil, how you doing?
All right.
I told George earlier I wanted to apologize about my call yesterday. That's not a reflection of me. I was just having some fun. When I called in yesterday about the Cuban people, what we were going to do in Perrine.
Yeah, okay, great. Call us again in about a year. Here's Pembroke Pines. Hello.
Hello, Neil.
Yes, sir.
How you doing?
Okay.
Listen, I just want to say that judge in Seminole County has to do the same thing that was given to the Democrat, that their votes were turned down because they were not correct. So she has to post those votes out. That is the only correct measure to do on this here. And as for
what votes out?
In Seminole County, the Republican ballots.
Oh, the absentee ballots, yeah.
Yes. So they got to be thrown out because the Democrats, they have Democrat ballots.
But you do understand that that's 4,700 vote advantage for Bush right there, out of those 15,000 absentee ballots.
Right.
That's all that's good for the Bush market.
Miss Harris, could I say this? I like to dry hump her with a bag over her face.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll arrange it for you. We'll call up Jeb, and on one of the off days, maybe we can work you in, so to speak. 567-0560, pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon wireless line. Who's this goofball?
So I came in yesterday at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, slept overnight, and here I am.
Oh, some tourist jackass with a funny hat on. I thought it was like somebody who knew something. 567-0560, pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon wireless line. Many, many open lines here this morning because obviously I'm talking to myself. And I understand that because we're small potatoes. And thank God for the TV set. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Speaking of the pizza loft. Can you imagine during what we've gone through with the alien business and now with the election stuff, if we didn't have this TV set in here and the satellite dish and whatever else, all of which was provided outside, and of course the fax machine which I bought with my own money? It's Neil Rogers' Do-It-Yourself Studios here at QAM, the cheapest bastards on the face of the earth. Here's Coral Gables. Hello.
Yeah, Neil, I just want to quote something out of the Navy Times, the Garnett Group, which is a military paper.
Uh-huh.
In 1984, a House Republican leader went to the floor to demand a recount in a disputed congressional race. That leader was Wyoming Republican Representative Dick Cheney. What a hypocrite.
What a dick.
Hey, one more thing.
Yeah.
In the Navy Times. There is no reason why the military, I'm retired military.
Yes, sir.
There was no reason why the military could not get their votes in. On every shore station and ship, there are federal ballots, which are recognized by the state of Florida.
Okay.
All right, buddy?
Where there's a will, there's a way.
You better believe it.
Okay, thanks. He's the Navy. 5670560. Say hi to Roger Staubach. Pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon wireless line. Out of town line 877-785-6345. That means we can order lunch, I guess, George. Oh, and you know something? Hank was right about these Gaviscon. Gaviscon? Whatever you call them. They're delicious. I mean, they're good for you. No, I like those. Tums do taste better.
Yeah, I like Tums better.
But these kind of like froth in your mouth. You know, they're like foamy. Yeah, they foam all over the place. Be careful you don't get any on your lip because people will start talking. I don't really care. 5670560, pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon wireless line. Here's a lady mobile in Miami. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Okay.
I'm having trouble hearing you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, your phone's not the best.
It was a few minutes ago. Maybe I should hang up and try
No,
later.
it's okay.
Got me now?
We got you.
I got you now, too. Great. Listen, I was thinking about thinking back to the 1996 election. I said, I have to run this by you.
Okay, your phone's crapping out. 5670560, pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon wireless line. Here's a mobile in Miami. Hello.
That was hilarious. Hey, was the caller before? That sounded like the bridge.
That was Bridge Tender Jr., as a matter of fact.
Exactly.
Yeah, my favorite part of the call was when he said,
"Stupid, idiotic jerk."
Yeah, I like that the best.
He's sounding like one of those Marine guys with the boats and the ships and the whatever.
Right,
Hey, listen,
right.
Neil, I think this is going to cause like a major new civil war. I think the country's going to cleave in half over this issue because I think it's real funny that one guy's being pressured to like resign. The other guy's, he's in his transitional phase. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think now you know why we got all those
talking
guns
to
here.
Jefferson's, only we're moving on in. We're moving on into the, East Wing.
And you know what, Neil? The day that this happens is the day that, if this or something else, that's why everyone's got their guns, to remove the government that was there illegally.
Oh, yeah, that'll do a lot of good when they start dropping those those neutron bombs. But nevertheless, good luck to you, sir. Let's see, here's another one of these, candlelight vigil in Boca. Should we promote this? It's not, at least it's not, what's his name?
Maybe people are bored. Maybe there's nothing good on TV.
Yeah, it's better than those potluck suppers. Those got kind of old, especially that pot. If they get some new stuff in. Candlelight vigil and demonstration in Boca. If you care about democracy, don't allow this election to be stolen, it says. Today and tomorrow. Now, wait a minute. It says Friday, December 1st, Saturday, December 2000. Let me say it again. It says Friday, December 1st and Saturday, December 2000. 3:30 to 7:30 p.m., Glades Road and Town Center. Huberty won, 19,000 votes, missing, yada, yada. Stand in unity, stop, I have no idea who this is from. But, hey, have a good time. The more meaningful one that I think was a little more specific was the AFL-CIO ad in the Herald this morning. It says, join us. We invite all Florida citizens who care about their vote to join in a rally at 4 p.m. today at the Stephen Clark Government Center, 111 Northwest 1st Street in Miami. In fact, free drinks for everybody if Steve Clark had his way, I'm sure, but of course he has nothing to say about it. Don't you think he'd be better than Mayor Pinga Pequena if we brought him back right now? Just prop him up in the chair. Have you ever seen that ad? Is it Conseco, that life insurance company? The ad where she keeps the husband and she's got him propped up in the chair with the tie and he's got the phone to his ear?
I don't think I've seen that.
And he's dead. And the wife comes in, he's working late again tonight, Marty. He's such a worker. And she goes in, and she props him up the other way in the chair, and she takes the paycheck in the envelope, you can see, and et cetera and so on. That's what we ought to do with Steve Clark's body. Do a hell of a lot better than that Pinga Pequena and be a lot less dangerous. Here's a mobile implantation. Hello?
Hey, Neil.
Yes, sir.
Hey, came here from Ohio. Let me tell you one thing. I've never seen a so screwed up place in all my life.
You got it.
As this place, but the only thing might come good out of this is there's 4 bozos, and that goofball's the mayor or governor of this place. In 4 years, hopefully, them sons of bitches will be out the pasture.
Yeah, 2 years for Jeb. He'll be long gone.
Yeah, well, I didn't know about that because I didn't vote for the bastard anyway. But he would fit right in with a lot of them Republicans they got in Ohio, because they're a bunch of crying, bleeding, whatever.
Yeah.
But anyhow, that's the only good thing that's going to come out of it, because Gore don't stand a chance in hell of winning this thing through the courts, and we'll get little baby up there, and these people are going to realize how good Bubba was.
Okay, you said it.
Went on, and they all walked out after him. On him when for not quitting. I remember when I did it, I was terrified that was going to happen to me. But the one exception to that rule is if the justice has asked you a question, you can continue on past that red light until they're finished asking you a question. So that may mean that this could go, if it's as active with Mr. Tribe as it was with Mr. Olson, that could mean that this could go on for a few minutes more past that hour and a half level. Again, just to reiterate, in the part that I saw, which was that initial part, with Ted Olson arguing on behalf of the Bush campaign, there was a great many questions that seemed pointed about whether or not this was a federal question, whether or not the United States Supreme Court, this was the time for the United States Supreme Court to be involved in this. Should the United States Supreme Court, what is the standard for the United States Supreme Court to be overruling a state Supreme Court? Shouldn't all deference be given to state Supreme Court? And doesn't the statutory scheme set out a scheme in which if there is a conflict, that Congress resolve the conflict rather than the United States Supreme Court? I want to reiterate and underline again that I only heard one side of the argument. You cannot and should not draw conclusions from how the justices are leaning one way or the other. These are the kinds of questions that should be expected and that would be expected, and I'm sure Ted Olson did expect.
Kind of changing his tune a little bit now, isn't it? But at any rate, we'll see. 5670560, pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon wireless line. Our poll question today, the election in Florida was fixed, 113 out of 154. That's 73.3%. As honest as any other state, 21, 13.5%. Flawed, but only by accidental events, 20, 12.9% out of 154 votes. Here's a mobile implantation. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
I agree with you about Gaviscon and about those Conseco commercials. All of them are pretty clever. But I want to talk to you about a few things. Number one, the Cuban Americans, they seem to want democracy in Cuba, but nowhere else.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, and the second
I don't know why,
thing,
I'm still here.
the second thing is with the election, I think there's one point that's been missed. The exit polls show that Gore won. Do you know why? Because exit polls ask people how they think how they voted.
Yeah.
So a lot of votes weren't counted.
Right.
That's why
Okay, we know that, sir. Have a great day, and thank you, and say hi to your Cuban friends. 5670560, pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon wireless line. Hasta que me olvides is what I would say to you, sir. Here's a mobile in Miami. Hello.
Neil.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. I think Dick Cheney had that heart attack the other day when he found out he was going to have a Bush and a colon in the White House at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Out of material.
Okay, yeah, before you started. 5670560, pound 560. Too bad we don't have CNN and the BBC here today. These great calls today. And like I've always said, why should this be any different from any other day? What's Bill Schneider saying?
It's going to degenerate into some kind of a partisan split, which just reflects the partisanship.
Let's assume for just a moment that the Supreme Court does come out with something approaching a unified position, even if not unanimous. Wouldn't we then, though, still expect the partisans on each side to play it or spin it their own way? It won't be the last word and necessarily the clearest.
Doesn't make any difference. You know, this Frank says, no, this guy needs some serious help. This is the guy that was so aghast when they were doing the thing about Bubba's blowjobs. This is the guy that was so indignant and aghast. Maybe somebody ought to show him what that's all about, how it works, where you put it. Maybe they ought to take him to McDonald's for lunch today. Maybe get a McHead to get, a little primer there. 5670560, pound 560 is a lady mobile in Port St. Lucie. Hello.
Hi, Neil.
Yes, ma'am.
How are you doing today?
All right.
I just have a couple of comments. I'd like to know, if anybody knows, how many times that rich bitch, Catherine Harris, went into work on Sunday.
How many times she did what? Okay, your phone's breaking up, sweetheart. Have Catherine buy you a new phone.
I think that was Darth Vader.
With some of that citrus money. 567-0560, pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon Wireless line.
Wants to change the law, that's fine, and the Supreme...
See, the thing is, if the U.S. Supreme Court, which we're mostly fully anticipating that they're going to say this is not for us to hear, it's a state matter, and don't bother us anymore, what that's going to mean is the Florida Supreme Court is going to be what they should be, and that is have the final word here in the state. And so that if these rulings in Leon County come out in a way that the Bush people don't like, and then they're going to have to appeal it first to the Florida Supreme Court. You know what the Florida Supreme Court's going to say to them? That's what they're going to say. And then they're going to go back to the U.S. Supreme Court and they're going to say, didn't you hear us the first time? 26 past 11 at 560 WQAM. Look at those protesters out there, man.
Sort of friendly, in a friendly way, yelling at each other. The police are here. It's been very friendly, very jovial, and that is the scene out here now. The two sides have come to express their opinions.
What are they saying? Jeb's an ass? What are they saying? He's an asshole. Oh, yeah, Jeb. Taking a little jab at Jeb.
The Neil Rogers Show. Sports Radio 560. QAM.
She fakes orgasms. I fake foreplay.
And now the newly elected Florida election supervisor, the count. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I am the call, and I know to count. Now, I'm the solution for the election for the election process. Why, it's the ice. 1, 2, 3. That's how our love can be. Tabulating can be. Discarding ballots makes it easy. Like making Alabama old lady. First you count the whole September world punch. A double punch is disqualified. Take the fingers on your hand and count them. Just like me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4. I only have 4. Oops. Got it. And for a recount. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's 11:30 at 560 WQAM. We got the Hank Goldberg Show at 2 o'clock. Dave Wannstedt Show with Hank at 5. Gildy on game night, 6 o'clock tonight. 7 o'clock we got your pregame, and at 7:30 game time from the Mac Arena. Red Wings and the Panthers. Boy, that could be really ugly tonight. Let's hope not. Maybe let's hope for a miracle. And let's hope for some people being there. 4,300 seats still available, I see. And, of course, it usually is about 6,000 every game, 6,500, 6,000. Only 4,300 for tonight's game. And that being the fact that, as you know, we'll have about 2,000 fake Red Wing fans here tonight. No, about 500 will be real Red Wing fans, and then there'll be about 1,500 phony front-running local people wearing Red Wing jerseys who aren't really Red Wing fans, but because they won 2 Stanley Cups back-to-back, are going to be faking it. I don't want to mention no names. Phony Red Wing fans here tonight. But anyway, at least there'll be some people in the stands, I hope. I'll be there. Here's a lady in the Keys. Hello.
Hi.
Yes, ma'am.
Something I keep seeing over and over again. On Larry King O'Reilly last night had this, that the ballots they aren't counting. Okay, we're back to that. But they say that by Gore's name, there's an indentation. The rest of the ballot is punched out. Why? Even Hutchinson on Larry King's show last night, you know which one that is, Senator Hutchinson from Texas.
Kay Bailey, yeah.
Yeah, well, she was saying that why, and she was talking with Dianne Feinstein. She was saying, why would Gore's name have an indentation and the rest of the ballot be punched out?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I saw it after the election, a female voter, there was one of the polls said that she tried to push through.
Right, the Chads are built up because...
Right, exactly.
Uh-huh.
What they did was, when she called somebody over, which a lot of people didn't do, because primarily people were voting for president, regardless of the rest of the ballot. So naturally it would go through if they voted down the ballot. But these ballots are being pushed aside. But what they did, when the attendant went over and opened the machine to pull out the Chads, all these Chads fell out under Gore's hole. To see why, I mean, now these ballots aren't being counted, though. They're being pushed to the side because the Republicans are protesting that dimple effect or indentation.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm just frustrated.
Even though let me say it again, the recount in Texas, where the Republican who was running for a state legislature in Texas lost and demanded a recount, every dimple vote was counted. He still lost, but every dimple ballot was counted.
Yeah, but my point is that on these shows they say that they have to go by a standard of a ballot if it's not consistent.
Yeah.
So if there's a dimple by the presidential vote regardless if it's Bush or Gore. And the rest of the ballot is punched through, they throw them out.
Well, the fact is that if the intent of the voter is clear, the vote's got to be counted.
That doesn't mean it's the end of the battle, and again, we only heard half of it. As soon as Greta gets wired up, she'll be right over.
All over.
She'll be able to finish.
All arguments are over on the Supreme Court.
Let's let Greta get wired up and come back.
Greta's wired.
Joining me in the studio here is Jan.
She's wired.
On election law specifically.
Get those Frank gives me the willy. He gives me the creep.
Snyder with us and Ken Gross.
I think
you've heard some of this teed up and explained by Roger your impressions and what are you expecting to hear when we hear the rest?
Well, I think Roger is right that this is a very aggressive court in questioning, and they're going to be very aggressive with both sides of the issue. That it hasn't always been true. 20 years ago when I had my first case at the court, under the Berger court, some lawyers referred to it as Sleepy Hollow. But
remember Chief Justice Berger, he's the one who says, I can't define pornography, but I know what it is when I see it.
Heard from Roger, basically the top of the first inning.
He's to borrow it from the Pope.
Seen the other side and what their play has been.
And let's just take a moment to step back and reflect on what this is really all about. What this is all about at the U.S. Supreme Court is whether the Florida State Supreme Court exceeded its authority and wrote law and made law rather than merely interpreting law when they said you can hand count and you can exceed that first deadline that the Secretary of State said she was to certify Florida's vote by.
That's correct, and it's a very narrow issue. And what happens with Supreme Court cases is they may decide a very narrow issue, but the way in which they may decide that issue can have large implications. Well, from Roger's report, if the court concludes that this case is really, at this point, up to the state and to the state Supreme Court, because ultimately it's the decision of Congress, well, that has enormous implications for this whole process, because that takes us to January 6th or January 5th this year if they pass a joint resolution, at which time both the House and the Senate are going to open up the ballots for the Electoral College. And, as we know, politically, the House is Republican, the Senate is going to be Democratic, at least evenly divided with the Vice President presiding, and that has the recipe for an impasse.
Let me just interrupt. The picture that you see here is the audio technician and the pool network pool truck getting those audio tapes, we presume, and getting ready to play them. So very short.
We better do the break right now, okay? Because they're going to start playing that stuff. So I guess it looks like Bush president and Gore vice president. Huh? No, seriously, that looks like there's a good chance of that happening. What did I just say the other day? Leave it to me. I said, let them alternate. Mondays it can be Bush, Tuesdays it can be Gore, every other day. Just make sure that it's not on Shabbos, because Lieberman would get pissed off. You bring the Goyim in on like Friday at sundown, and that's the way it works. 24 till noon at 560 QM.
It's Friday, you bastard.
Cassie, secretary, you've got to get between your knees. His head up, so sweet, all together, helping up railroad speed. The Yankees sleep, drop dead sleep, Saints would be a good choice for disease. What that drug, with that sheet, is the aim of wrong of the GOP. Effort food, partisan groove, get spot proper and smell her shoes. Mix bitch fraud, make up squad, with one eyelash falling off. Hey, Cassie, secretary, you got to get between your knees. With his head a little squeeze, for another helping of railroad speed.
11:42 at 560 WQM. That's great. That's got 2 bullets. 2. Anyway, we got less than 2 minutes to go here.
Taking up on how many angels dance on the head of...
Well, I'll give you a great case in front of the Supreme Court. But in the meantime, we got less than 2 minutes for the audio tapes to play. Now, let me ask you, what are they going to do if he's still talking here? That's going to be interesting, huh? Let's just sit here and watch. Oh, I'm sorry. 567-0560, pound 560 on the... Sorry, Larry, but the tapes are coming, okay? Dummy up, you idiot. Here's a mobile in Weston. Hello.
Hey, I just wanted to tell you a quick story about your station. On Election Day, I was driving in my car listening to your program, and when I actually got in line with my mobile, I want to give you a call to tell you what the voting turnout was in Weston. And I didn't remember the phone number of the station, so I called information and got WQAM, actually got the business office.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them what the phone number was to reach Neil Rogers.
And I bet you they had no idea.
They had no idea.
Yeah.
And I said, well, he's on the air right now on your station. They said, well, we have no idea.
How do you like that?
And they don't care.
And they don't care either. Okay, thanks for the good news. They have no idea and they don't care. Just like when people call for numbers of our sponsors, we don't care. That's our management's attitude. We don't care. We can't be bothered with that. So anybody that's advertising on this radio station, we've heard of this before, but at least this is the one show on the station that's honest. Our management doesn't care enough to provide, with a list of numbers. Even with George in there, we don't have it.
The Honorable, the Chief Justice and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States.
How'd you like that timing? Was that good or what?
Oyez, oyez, oyez.
Hey,
For the Honorable, the Supreme Court of the United States admonished to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting.
Isn't this pathetic?
I save the United States and this honorable court.
Oyez. Yeah, I'll take it first. Oh, yeah, that can't sound
one I heard. Warning number 00836, George W. Bush.
That's the fascist
versus the Palm Beach County Canvassing Board. Mr. Olson.
And may it please the court. 2 weeks after the November 7th presidential election, the Florida Supreme Court overturned and materially rewrote portions of the carefully formulated set of laws enacted by Florida's legislature to govern the conduct of that election and the determination of controversies with respect to who prevailed on November 7th. These laws had been formulated by the Florida legislature pursuant to an express delegation of authority to it by the United States Constitution. The election code that the Florida legislature developed conformed to Title III, Section 5 of the United States Code. That provision invites states to devise rules in advance of an election to govern the counting of votes and the settling of election controversies.
Well, Mr. Olson, isn't Section 5 sort of a safe harbor provision for states? And do you think that it gives some independent right of a candidate to overturn a Florida decision based on that section?
We do, Justice O'Connor. It is a safe harbor, but it's more than that. And Section 5 of Title III needs to be construed in connection with the history that brought it forth.
Yes, but I would have thought it was a section designed in the case of some election contest ends up before the Congress. A factor that the Congress can look at in resolving such a dispute. I just don't quite understand how it would be independently enforceable.
That's why I mentioned the context in which that section was adopted. In light of the extreme controversy that was faced by this country as a result of the 1876 election. And as this court knows, that election was very close. It led to controversy, contests, discord. Congress was very much concerned about the possibility of that happening again. And
what they did was, and it's typical of grant and aid programs, they said, if you run a clean shop down there, we'll give you a bonus. And if you don't, then you take your chances with everybody else.
Justice Kennedy, I submit that it is much like a compact that Congress is offering in the form of Section 5. Yes, if you do these things, certain things will happen. But among these things, what Congress wanted to accomplish with Section 5 is not only to provide the benefit to the states, but to provide the benefit to the United States of the states accepting that implicit proposal.
What is there in the opinion of the Supreme Court of Florida that indicates that it relied on this federal statute in the reasoning for its decision and in its judgment?
Well, I think the fact is that it did not. What it did was it disregarded the compact When the state adopted a code of ethics, or code of election procedures to govern the election and the determination of disputes pursuant to the election, it brought itself into that safe harbor and guaranteed to the voters and the candidates in that state that the controversy and turmoil that infected this country after the 1870s...
But we're looking for a federal issue. And I
Justice Kennedy says,
thought that he might have argued that the Secretary of State was instructed by the Supreme Court not to jeopardize the state's chances, and it cited 3 U.S.C. sections 1 through 10. And so if the state Supreme Court relied on a federal issue or a federal background principle and got it wrong, then you can be here.
Well, I certainly agree that it mentioned those provisions. I was simply saying that it blew past the important provisions of Section 5 and the benefits that Section 5 gives to the states, to the voters in that state, and to the people running for office in that state. That is to say that if the rules are complied with, if disputes are resolved according to the rules that are set forth, then not only will the electors chosen by the voters in that state be given conclusive effect at the time they are counted by Congress, but we will not have the controversy, dispute, and chaos that's been taking place in Florida State.
Suppose a less controversial federal benefit scheme. Let's say the scheme that says states can get highway funds if they hold their highway speeds to a certain level, all right? And suppose you have a state Supreme Court that, in your view, unreasonably interprets a state statute as not holding the highway speed to the level required in order to get the benefit of that safe harbor. Would you think that raises a federal question and that you could appeal the state court decision here because it deprived the state of the benefit of the highway fund?
No, I don't think so.
Why is this any different?
This is a great deal different because this is, first of all, Article 2 of the Constitution, which vests authority to establish the rules exclusively in the legislatures of the state, tie in with Section 5. Secondly, as this court has stated...
Let's just talk about Section 5. I mean, the constitutional question is another one. Why is Section 5 in that regard any different from the highway funding?
I think it can't be divorced from Article 2 of the Constitution because it's a part of a plan for the vesting in the legislatures of a state, and Section 5 implements Article 2 in the sense that it provides a benefit not just to the state, but to the voters.
But just to talk about the statutory issue, I assume that if we worked long enough with Justice Scalia's hypothetical, we could find a case where a court adjudicated with reference to the federal principle and got the federal principle wrong. Did the Indiana versus Baronet Convention? Did that happen here?
Well, I think that the state Supreme Court did not pay much attention to the federal statute. It was obviously aware of it. It did get the federal...
Well, then there's no federal constitutional issue here.
Well, there is a federal...
statutory.
Well, we believe that there is, Justice Kennedy, because although the state recognized it, it blew right past it. The state legislature adopted the code that the Section 5 of Article 3 of Title 3 invited it to do. The state Supreme Court, which had no right under the Constitution, but I can't divorce the constitutional provision from Section 5, then overturned the plan that the state enacted through its legislature to make sure that what happened down in Florida was not going to happen. And so what the state Supreme Court did, knowing full well that these provisions existed, overturned the carefully enacted plan by Florida.
Mr. Olson, do you think that Congress, when it passed 3 U.S., intended that there would be any judicial involvement with it? I mean, it seems to me it can just easily be read as a direction to Congress, saying what we're going to do when these electoral votes are presented to us for counting.
I think that it wasn't intended directed to Congress, but it seems to me that in the context in which it was adopted and the promise that it afforded, that the conclusive effect would be given to the state selection of electors, that it is a somewhat empty remedy, and it doesn't accomplish Congress's objectives if it cannot be enforced when an agency of the state government steps in, as the Florida Supreme Court did here, and overturn the plan by which the Florida Legislature carefully set forth a program so that disputes could be resolved and we wouldn't have the controversy conflict, and chaos that we submitted.
Mr. Olson, your submission is based on the premise that the Florida court overturned something that the statute had done. Is it not arguable, at least, that all they did was fill gaps that had not been addressed before?
Justice Stevens, I don't think that in this case that's even remotely arguable. What the state Supreme Court did is take a set of timetables, a set of provisions that...
Yes, and the first one was the mandatory. Is it your view still that the shall date controls in all respect?
No, not necessarily. That the 102, there's the two provisions are 102.111 and 102.112. Right. 111 contains the shall date, 102 contains the may date. Correct. Both of those statutes, both of those provisions say that the returns must be, or shall be, followed by a certain deadline. The shall and the may provisions simply can relate to the possible remedy. We submit that under either interpretation, the Secretary of State of Florida either must or shall ignore those returns or may set those aside in her discretion.
Does that mean if there were an act of God that prevented the returns from being filed, that she would have discretion either to accept or reject the returns?
Yes, I believe
she would have discretion. Would she be compelled in that event to accept the returns?
I don't think so. She took the position.
She has the total discretion either to accept or reject.
Is
there any circumstance in which she would be compelled to accept a late return?
I don't know of any. I haven't thought of any, Justice Stevens.
Well, you're arguing in effect that it's a mandatory deadline. I wonder if you really mean it's mandatory.
Well, the problem is that what we're saying is that either it's mandatory, in which case she could not accept them.
But you don't know whether it's mandatory.
Well, the Florida Supreme Court and what the Circuit Court did in that case was said that it wasn't, and we'll accept this for purposes of this argument, that it wasn't altogether.
But one of the things that's of interest to me is the extent to which you say there was a change in the law. It seems to me that in order to answer that question, you have to know what your view of the law was before this all happened.
I think that we can answer that this way, is that whether it was shall ignore or may ignore, it was not must accept.
Under any circumstance, it was not must.
Under no circumstances was it must accept. Now, the second...
Even an act of God or fraud?
I don't believe so.
Is it the law in Florida, like as in most states and in the federal government, that when an official has discretion, may accept or may not accept, that has to be exercised within the limits of reason?
Yes.
Right. Well, then isn't it possible that when the court says she must accept under certain circumstances, what they mean is, outside those circumstances, given the circumstances here, it would be unreasonable to refuse.
Well, what the court did was so constrain those circumstances virtually to make them non-existent.
Right, so then what you're arguing about is a determination by the State Court of Florida as to what the circumstances are under state law where the action of a state official would or would not be reasonable.
I think that yes, but I think it has to be looked at in the context in which that was done. When the state Supreme Court so constrained and says in its opinion, shall accept these late returns until 5 p.m. on November 26th, and in the context there was no discretion left for the Secretary of State at all.
Mr. Olson, may I ask you, because you've been skipping over what I thought was a key piece of the Florida legislation. The Florida Supreme Court said there's the deadline, and that conflicts with another provision of this law, a provision that says there shall be, under certain circumstances, recounts. And then there's a rather detailed description of the process that's necessary. The timeline for when you can ask the recount is on the 6th day.
Up to.
Yeah, up to. And it would be impossible in a populous county to, in one day, do what the statute instructs must be done when there's a recount. The Florida Supreme Court said, it's right in its opinion, there's two conflicts. And the first one they mentioned, straight out on page 21A of your appendix, is that
Yeah.
There has to be a reconciliation between this, yes, there can be recounts, and yes, this is a deadline. So they are trying to reconcile two provisions.
But if that's the case, how come they didn't give them enough time? But anyway, we ought to take a break, because the commercials will get in. Make no mistake about that. You're listening to audio tapes of the oral arguments in front of the U.S. Supreme Court this morning on the Bush motion to overrule the Florida Supreme Court. Are they going to overrule it?
No.
Don't look too good.
Sports Radio 560, WQAM Miami, Fort Lauderdale, a Beasley Broadcast Group station, WQAM.com for the world.
Instead, we are going to resort to the will of the people, the will of the electorate, the will of the voters, so to speak, and we are going to act because we can't rewrite the statute, but we are going to partially rewrite the statute. We're going to resort to our equitable powers. And among the things that the court did, and there are a range of them, as I have indicated, they took away the discretion of the secretary and instructed her to accept these manual recounts.
Mr. Wilson, on the equitable powers, they were doing that in setting a new deadline. And I don't think you would argue the case would have been more acceptable if there had been no deadline.
No, it wouldn't have been. But
on the fight between may and shall, they relied on four traditional canons of statutory construction and not equity at all.
They recited four canons of statutory construction, Justice Stevens, but when they said they used those canons of statutory construction to say that the words may and shall mean shall not. That is not a reasonable exercise of statutory construction. I think it's relatively obvious that what the Supreme Court did is exactly what Section 5 of Article 3 intends not to happen. Change the rules.
I don't read their opinion that way, Mr. Olson. It seems to me that the portion of their opinion dealing with statutory construction ends with the conclusion that the Secretary has discretion. The portion of the opinion employing the canons of construction does not place any limits upon the Secretary's discretion.
Well, yes, but I agree with that up to a point. But then it says that she must accept these returns that are after the deadline.
That was not on the basis of any canons of statutory construction. That was on the basis of the state's constitution.
Well, that's right. So there was both going on, and what the court was bound and determined to do was to get to a consequence that the court determined was consistent with the will of the people, irrespective of what the statute
Mr. Olson, would you agree that when we read a state court decision, we should read it in the light most favorable to the integrity of the state Supreme Court? That if there are two possible readings, one that would impute to that court injudicial behavior, lack of integrity, indeed dishonesty, and the other that would read the opinion to say, we think this court is attempting to construe the state law. It may have been wrong. We might have interpreted it differently, but we are not the arbiters, they are.
I would like to answer that in two ways. In the first place, I don't mean to suggest, and I hope my words didn't, that there was a lack of integrity or any dishonesty by the Florida Supreme Court. What we're saying that it was acting far outside the scope of its authority in connection with a exercise of power that is vested by the Constitution of the United States.
If it tells us we see these two provisions in conflict, but they need to be reconciled.
Under almost any other circumstances, yes, Justice Ginsburg, but in this context, we're talking about a federal right, a federal constitutional right, and the rights of individual citizens under the Constitution. And so, therefore, this court has a greater responsibility to look.
I'd like to get focused a little more on the same area. If it were purely a matter of state law, I suppose we normally would leave it alone where the state Supreme Court found it. And so you probably have to persuade us there's some issue of federal law here. Otherwise, why are we acting?
Yes.
And are you relying in that regard on Title II? I mean, would you like to characterize, Article II, would you like to characterize the federal issue that you think governs?
We are very definitely relying on Article II of the Constitution. The framers of the Constitution debated long and hard. It was one of the longest debates that took place during the formation of the Constitution. Where should this power be lodged? In the federal legislature, in the state legislature, and at the ballot booth, or what? The one thing that was discussed and rejected by virtually everyone is that the power to select the manner in which electors would be appointed would be in the state judiciary. And we quote, in the state judiciary. That was rejected. The notion that it would be vested in the state judiciary was something that was rejected, and what the framers decided to do was to vest it in the state legislature, and vested that authority under Article II, not just in the state,
but the state legislature could vest it in the judiciary if it wanted, as I read the McPherson case. And here they've done something else. The state judiciary said, we're going to invoke the ordinary election procedures, which, warts and all, it involves some interpretation by the courts and contest proceedings, etc.
Well, it said that, Justice Kennedy. But what it did was supplant a set of rules enacted before the election to govern the election, or a set of rules made up after the election.
All right, Mr. Olson, let's assume that it did that for the sake of argument. I want to go back to the issue that the Chief Justice raised a little while ago. And I'd like you to comment on this line of reasoning. You got Section 5. Congress in the statute seems to have gone to great lengths to provide what to do in the situation that you are describing, accepting your view of the case. Section 5, it says, if you do certain things within certain times, the conclusion that you draw is going to be conclusive upon the Congress. And in Section 15, it sets out, in fact, an elaborate set of contingencies about what the Congress is supposed to do and can do if there is a dispute as to whether a given set of procedures in the state have conformed to Section 5. Section 15 refers to regularity, it refers to legality and illegality, and it looks to me as though, at least at this stage of the proceedings, Congress has said, if there's a question about whether this if-then provision in Section 5, construing Article 2, has been satisfied, then this is the decisional tree for the Congress to follow in deciding what to do about it and in resolving challenges. And it looks to me as though, at this stage of the game, the statute has committed the determination of the issues that you raise and the consequences to follow from them to the Congress. Why should the federal judiciary be interfering in what seems to be a very carefully thought out scheme for determining what happens if you are right?
Because I submit that writes Section 5 essentially out of existence if an agency of state government, if a state legislature...
No, it doesn't write it out of existence. It provides in Section 15 what happens if the state agency does what you says it did.
If it does what you says it did. What a good point to stop. If it does what you says it did. Okay, well, hit Justice Souter. He's a little confused. 9 minutes after noon at 560 WQM. Whoever wins this whole thing, we're all going to be sitting back lighting up a big stogie, huh? Lighting up a big fat one?
Uh-huh.
Well, if Bush wins it, it'll just be a cigar.
So I'm out again, by the way.
You're out of cigars?
Yeah.
Well, call on Frank. He'll screw you over. He'll help you out.
The Neil Rogers Show. Sports Radio 560. QAM.
Did say if you do these things, certain consequences will flow from it. Florida did these things. And we submit that the courts are here to protect the benefit of the bargain that Florida made when it responded to that invitation. And because
we have to separate your statutory argument from your constitutional argument to the extent that you're relying just on the Constitution. Do you think that Congress could, by Section 15, exclude the courts from adjudicating the constitutionality of what the state has done?
No, I don't think so.
But it certainly could express its preference for a scheme whereby the initial litigation, if you will, at this level, would take place in the Congress. To acknowledge that is not to say that the issue is justiciable or that this court has somehow been necessarily excluded from the process for all time. It is simply to say that the first line of litigation at the federal level seems, under the statute, to be Congress and not the court. Isn't that a fair reading of 15?
That's not a fair reading of Section 5. And let me answer this question, and I'd like to reserve.
I don't think Section 5 goes to the issue. Well, the question is whether it's a fair reading of Section 15.
I don't think that they can be read in isolation. I think that Section 5 was designed to avoid the problem created by the controversy and the having to resolve this in Congress, which is exactly what did happen in 1876 and was a very unsatisfactory situation.
In 1876, Congress did not have the rules. 1877. Congress did not have the rules with respect to conclusiveness that it now has under Section 5.
And that's right, and it put those rules with respect to conclusiveness into Section 5. The Florida Legislature brought into that scheme, and now the Florida Supreme Court, which doesn't have any constitutional authority pursuant to Section 2 to do so, upset that scheme, deprived Florida of the benefit of doing exactly what Congress wanted to have happen under Section 5. I would, with the court's permission, reserve the balance.
Very well, Mr. Olson. Mr. Clark, we'll hear from you.
Yeah. Mr. Clark, as in what's cleaning?
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the Court, our argument simply addressed issues having to do with Florida law.
Joseph,
and the point made by the Secretary is this, that the law in the state of Florida on November 7th was changed by the Supreme Court of Florida's decision on November 21. The Secretary is not contesting the right of the Florida Supreme Court to change the law of Florida. She is simply pointing out that the law did change.
Does the Secretary maintain that in some instances she has a discretion that a court does not? Or can a court do whatever she might do under Florida law?
Under Florida law, she has certain discretion that I think a court probably does not have in the protest period, Justice Kennedy, and that would be that she had the discretion to decide whether or not returns could be permitted after that seventh day. And indeed, that's based on two things that we have in the record. One is an opinion that was issued by the Division of Elections that talks about the circumstances in which the Secretary would exercise discretion. And the second is the letter that the Secretary sent to the 3 or 4 canvassing boards that requested an extension of time after the 14th deadline had passed. She sent a letter out. She said, please indicate to me whether or not you intend to file returns after the deadline, and if you do, what the reasons are. She collected a set of criteria, she applied the criteria, and then sent a letter back. And what she did, Justice Kennedy, in the case of the division's letter, the opinion, which of course is binding under Florida law on elections officials who receive them, the division had said that there were certain circumstances such as acts of God, hurricanes, and that kind of thing where the discretion would be exercised. When she came up with her additional reasons for considering whether or not she would exercise her discretion, she indicated a number of them, which are also contained within the record. It's at the Joint Appendix of 21. She indicated whether there was a result of voter fraud, or the substantial
that she would exercise her discretion. Did she say she would have to exercise her discretion in those conditions?
I think she would have to exercise her discretion.
Quite could compel her to.
Yes, sir.
Do you think that was clear before the opinion of the Supreme Court in this case?
Yes, sir.
Let me just ask one general question for you to comment on whether it's a change in the law. To what extent, in your view,
did the Supreme Court of Florida consider itself bound by either prior precedent or the Constitution of the state which pre-existed?
In terms of handing down...
In terms of the particular result it reached in this case.
I believe the Supreme Court of Florida was looking at its law in terms of articulating the law that it wanted to have then and on a going forward basis. I mean, what it did, and obviously, since it's the chief court of the state, it has the right to do whatever it wishes to do with respect to Florida law, only bound by whatever separation of powers.
Do you think they thought their decision was dictated either by prior precedent or by the Constitution of the state?
Your Honor, I don't know whether they thought that or not, but that's not what the opinion says. As a matter of fact, the opinion is pretty clear. They start out by talking about statutory construction, and they hinge everything on the use of the word interpret, and then they sort of turn the word interpret to a use that it's not intended to be. But then when they get to the point of designing the rule of law they're going to go forward on, they don't talk about interpreting the statute. They then go and base it on principles of equity in the Florida Constitution. And indeed, what they end up with, Your Honor, is this statement with respect to the discretion that the Secretary is left with, and that is this. And it's on 35 of the Joint Appendix. We conclude that consistent with Florida's election scheme, the Secretary may reject a board's, that's the canvassing board's, amended returns only if the returns are submitted so late that their inclusion will preclude a candidate from contesting certification or preclude Florida voters from participating fully in the federal electoral process. Now, Your Honor, there's no way...
Your position is that was entirely new.
Yes, sir.
And I'm just wondering, if therefore your submission is that it was not dictated by the Constitution or by prior precedent.
No, Your Honor. Well, I thought you said a moment ago that the Florida court did rely on the Florida Constitution. There's a section of their opinion devoted to that.
Your Honor, in devising their they refer to the Florida Constitution, but the issue that we're here on, as I understand it, sir, is whether or not the law changed. There's no question that they have a right to do what they did. The only difference
perhaps another statement of the issue is to what extent did the Florida Supreme Court, in construing the statute, rely on more general provisions of the Florida Constitution, which they cited in their opinion?
I think they did rely, in creating the remedy, on the Florida Constitution. I believe they created a right that had not previously been seen there, which they have a right to do. But, Mr. Chief Justice, the issue again is whether or not the law that they articulated on November 21 is different than the law that existed on November 7, and how the Secretary of State, in exercising her discretion, was to divine the standard that would be established on November 21.
Your position is, so long as it's different, it violates Section 5, and therefore we have a right to step in.
Well, Justice Scalia, we have not addressed the federal issues because, I mean, we're in a situation where you have...
Well, this is a federal court.
I understand that. I apologize. But we have the Secretary of State here, we have the Legislature has filed by amicus, and of course the state has not appeared. So it's a little unusual. We haven't addressed those issues, but to answer your question, yes, sir.
Can you tell me, when this petition was filed here, the Secretary had not certified anybody the winner. And now the Secretary has certified a winner. And therefore, I guess, whether we win, whether your side, the side you're supporting, wins or loses, it doesn't change that. And I guess that's moot. But my question is there any respect in which this really makes a difference, this case? How? I'm thinking, if it does make a difference, the numbers of voters, that kind of thing, right for us to decide now. How could it make a difference? What's the consequence of our going one way or the other now in this case?
Your Honor, it makes an enormous difference because the relief that has been requested would be for the court to determine that the law, in effect, at the time of the election was that manual recounting of ballots would not be permitted to address voter error, which I think has been extensively...
We don't have... Well, suppose they won, and the relief was, suppose your side won, and the relief was, fine, it should have been certified on November 14th or 18th instead of November 26th.
Now, what's the consequence of that?
Well,
just that. Forgetting what the reasoning is. Is there a consequence that flows from that is real, adverse, significant, concrete, that we could predict now as opposed to speculating?
The only immediate result would be that you would have a margin that would, instead of being 536 votes, would be 900 and some odd votes, and it would only be added to as a result of whatever was added by the overseas ballots.
And in this case we've said a claim is not right if it rests upon contingent future events that may not occur as anticipated, or indeed may not occur at all. And so what I wonder is this in this realm of speculation as to whether or not it will or will not make a difference to the outcome of the election.
It will make a difference to the outcome of the election because there is an ongoing contest which is interrelated and is involved in the Supreme Court's opinion. And of course, because the Supreme Court of Florida, in coming up with the remedy that they came up with, completely changed the period of time from a relatively short period of time, 7 days for a protest, and a much longer period for a contest, we now have a situation where there's 19 days for the protest and 16 days for the contest.
It's too late to lengthen the time for the contest. I mean, to the extent that they've shortened the contest time, that's water over the dam right now, isn't it?
Yes, Justice Gore. The issue here, I'm sorry.
Is it not the case that if the votes are as they have been shown to be under the Florida Supreme Court's opinion, the race is much closer, and therefore some counties under Florida law would conduct recounts that otherwise would not conduct recounts? Doesn't whether a recount is conducted depend upon how likely it is that the recount is going to change the outcome?
Your Honor, if the law is returned to the point it was on November 7, there is no right to a manual recount to correct voter error, and that will end the litigation that currently exists in the state of Florida, which were the opinions of the Secretary of State's Division of Elections that were issued, and also the state of the law as it existed at that point in time. The record shows very clearly that there is no dispute that there were any problems with voting machines or any of the tabulation problems with voting machines. It was simply when they went through the process of what is, Justice Ginsburg, a discretionary right to a manual recount, not a mandatory one. When they went into that and did the test, each of those canvassing boards did not find any problem with a mechanical problem. It was simply a problem in terms of voter error.
The Secretary took the...
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark. We'll get back to this 26th afternoon at 560 WQF. Only in the Banana Republic, baby. Only in Miami.
It just does look like a very dramatic change made by the Florida court. And I'm wondering if that is consistent, in fact, with the notion expressed, at least, in Section 5, so that the result would be, if it did go to Congress, it would be a change.
I agree that the date was implemented pursuant to the court's equitable powers. Other than that, it was a routine exercise in statutory construction. The court was faced with a situation, first of all, where because of conflicting advice, the counties had started and then stopped conducting manual recounts because of advice from the Secretary of the State, which the Supreme Court ultimately concluded to be erroneous. Yes, and that advice was, and this was really the beginning of all of the problem, her advice was that the provision providing for recounts, manual recounts, not requiring them but giving them one of the options, only came into play when there was some defect in the machinery and was not available for voter error. That is, for voters who didn't punch the cards the way they were supposed to. And the attorney, your office came out with the opposite conclusion. The Secretary's brief contends that that had always been the rule in Florida. Is that the case? Do you know of any other elections in Florida in which recounts were conducted, manual recounts, because of an allegation that some voters did not punch the cards the way they should have? And therefore, no problem with
well, the machinery is working fine, but, there were pregnant chads, hanging chads, and so forth.
No.
Did it ever happen before?
I'm not aware of it ever happening before, but I can say that the Supreme Court of Florida for 100 years has put a duty on election officials to discern the intent of the voter. And while the Secretary of the State refers to it as voter error, when the ballot is punched, that's under the laws of the state of Florida, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, that voter has cast the ballot, even if the Chad did not.
So is it your position that any interpretation the Supreme Court of Florida makes to implement the will of the people is never a new law?
That the Supreme, yes, I can't say ever, but I say that on the case before the court, all that was before the court was ordinary statutory construction, which must be, the result of it, whether this court would agree with it or disagree with it, must be respected by this court. That's the very foundation of federalism.
Are you relying on the Florida Supreme Court statement at least twice in its opinion? Now I look at the page to which Mr. Clark refers, page 37A. It says for the second time that the section governing manual recounts appears to conflict with the sections that set a deadline, and it's reconciling that conflict.
Yes,
but it was wrong or right. That's what it said its mission was, and that's what it did.
Yes, both in words and in operation, the statutes could not work together because of the time for requesting manual recount, the extent of the job of manual recount.
What is the section that requires manual recounts?
It's 102.166 authorizes manual recounts.
That's different from requiring.
Yes, but once it starts, Justice Scalia, once it's authorized, if the initial sample recount shows an error that might affect the outcome of the election, then the board is then required to, among other things, conduct a full manual recount.
No, it's required to do one of three things, one of which could be a manual recount.
Yes.
It could decide to do one of the other two instead.
Yes, the problem faced by the county.
The court says that there's a requirement of a manual recount, but I don't see anything in the text of the statute that requires a manual recount.
The statute requires that the election officials attempt to discern the cause of the error. Here, the cause of the error was that in these counties was that the machines were not able to read ballots. 10,000 ballots in Palm Beach County, the machine did not read as including a vote for president. That was the issue. So the solution to that was not the machines, even when they're operating properly, would not read these ballots. So what was left to the county canvassing board then was to do the full manual recount. And the language of that statute again says they shall do a full manual recount in those circumstances.
Well, it says that the board may authorize the manual recount. It doesn't require it.
No.
But if it does authorize it, then it tells us how to do it, and says they shall appoint as many counting teams as necessary, presumably as necessary to do it within the time limit.
Yes, Justice O'Connor, but again, these under the law, these requests can be made up to the time of canvassing. That means up to 6 or 7 days. And also, even in the number of ballots at issue here are between 650,000 in Palm Beach County and also 900,000, up to 900,000 in Broward County.
Well, if that is a statutory problem, the court's resolution didn't really solve it, did it? Because even with her extended time period, the same statutory problem exists. There still isn't enough time under the extended deadlines for some of these counties that have an enormous number of votes to conduct a manual recount. Isn't that right? To resolve a supposed conflict in the statute in a manner that leaves in place the same problem that existed before, it seems to me not a real resolution of the statutory problem.
But the Supreme Court tried to blend it all together to make it work, Justice Scalia, and again, it came up with a solution. The Secretary of State's argument here is based on the Secretary of State herself recognized that she had the discretion under Florida law to accept returns filed outside of that 7-day deadline. A breakdown of the machines, in her view, would justify late returns. A failure of the machines to read ballots would not justify late filed returns. The Supreme Court said that the legal standard she was using was wrong. We submit that decision of the Supreme Court is the law in the state of Florida.
I'm going to extend your time 2 minutes, Mr. Hancock, because you haven't had a chance to say a lot yet.
I don't need the extension time, Your Honor.
Okay, good, because that means we can do a break. And then we can hear Leary Tribe. 23 before 1 at 560 WQAM. They're a bunch of pricks, basically, aren't they? No matter what it is. Yeah, well, and how about that Ruth Bader Ginsburg? What time is your show going to be on? Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Sounds like she's practicing go to McDonald's and give some Nick Head. What the hell am I doing with this article? Oh, the no change in condom ban says the Vatican. I just thought I would slip that in here. We'll get to that later on, as they continue being as repressive as they want to be. And whatever you do, don't forget.
There's no fact in the church.
23 till 1 at 560 WQAM.
The Neil Rogers Show. Sports Radio 560 QAM.
No, I don't think so, Mr. Chief Justice. It's just that I don't trust my own imagination to have exhausted all possibilities. For example, in the case in, I think it was 1890, in Fitzgerald v. Green, when this court held that only states can punish fraudulent voting for presidential electors, it got into the act sort of obliquely and at an angle, and that had a bearing on the question of how the presidential electoral slate might be composed, but it certainly didn't get into this.
No, it certainly was quite different from this hypothetical.
So that's certainly right.
You suggest in your reply brief that it is not, I think you said it's not self-evident that the Florida Legislature at this time has the right to appoint any slate of delegates because the Congress has set the date, and the date is the general election day. If that is so, doesn't this mean that when we think about justiciability, we must be very careful to preserve the role of the court? You have said that or suggested here on the page in your reply brief that the Florida Legislature now has no role. You are now suggesting that this court has no role. That means the Supreme Court of Florida is it, so far as judicial interpretation of the consequences of 3 U.S.C. Section 5.
Well, Justice Kennedy, first of all, I do want to be clear that in our view, the question of whether and when and how the Florida Legislature can enter the picture is in no way presented here. That paragraph was intended to suggest that it's not obvious that the views of some that there's no problem is right. Secondly, if it were the case that the Florida Legislature could not simply decide, well, we're tired of all this counting, we're moving in, and that this court cannot decide whether the conditions of 3 U.S.C. Section 5 are met, it would then remain only for Congress to make a determination, and adding the Florida Legislature would not, after all, have added an adjudication.
And my point is that puts hydraulic pressure on their non-justiciability argument and makes it a very, very important argument and a critical argument in this case.
Well, perhaps, Justice Kennedy, but I frankly can't see how it would affect the decision in this case. That is, after all, you have before you a judgment of the highest court of the state. As Justice Ginsburg and others have suggested, it would ordinarily be the case, surely, that one would not go out of one's way to read the judgment as a breach of faith with the duties of trying to reconcile provisions that are...
Well, I guess in the area, though, of presidential electors, it could be that court, as all courts would be, have to be informed, at least, by the provisions of Section 5 in reviewing the laws enacted by the legislature of the state. I mean, it had to register somehow with the Florida courts that statute was there, and that it might be in the state's best interest not to go around changing the law after the election.
Well, Justice O'Connor, I certainly agree that if the Florida Supreme Court adverted to 3 U.S.C. Section 5, and as Justice Kennedy asked earlier, got it wrong,
then there would be a federal issue for this court. Would it be, I wonder, a federal issue?
Is there a federal issue if the court doesn't?
No. The answer is no.
Advert to it.
It would be nice, but remember, it is
because of Article 2, which, after all, does give the legislature plenary power, and must have wanted to have the laws in place so that Florida wouldn't risk losing its electoral votes. I mean, the legislature had to want that by enacting laws, and perhaps the Florida court has to be aware of the consequences to the state of changing the rules.
But Justice O'Connor, under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, the authority to regulate the manner of the choice of electors is vested in the state legislature. If the state legislature decides from the beginning to exercise that authority by instructing the various institutions, certainly not just the courts, the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, in very particular ways to exercise their roles in the process.
Well, it certainly did by enacting that date. Here is the certification date. How could it have been clearer?
Well, I suppose it could be a violation of Florida law if the enactment of that date is construed as a direction to a particular authority, like the Secretary of State or the state's highest court, to take certain actions in order to get the benefit of this bonus. But only a violation of federal law. I don't see how you get a Florida law without a state law. I'm sorry.
Is it about the Florida Constitution?
Well, it might have been a violation.
So then you run into the Blacker case.
But it seems to me that the federal question, which is really what brings us here, can only arise if 3 U.S.C. Section 5 is something other than what Mr. Olson called an invitation to the state.
It can also arise under the section of the Constitution that was construed in Blacker. That's quite independent of 3 U.S.C.
If one concluded that Florida had violated its duty to empower the legislature to take these regulatory steps.
If one concluded that the Florida legislature had relied on the state constitution in a way that the Blacker case says it may not in construing the statute.
I think that's possible, Mr. Chief Justice, but the judgment before you doesn't provide even an inkling, I think, of proof about those matters. All we have...
Well, we've argued whether it doesn't.
Well, I think we've been arguing several interrelated things. One of the things we've been arguing is whether one could, in good faith, reach the conclusion, novel as it was in some respects, as Justice O'Connor points out, that the Florida Supreme Court reached. Now, if the answer to that question was no, perhaps if there were a due process issue in this case, and if someone had a protectable interest that was injured, that would be relevant. But the federal question that makes that relevant here would arise only if one forgot that 3 U.S.C. Section 5 is all carrot and no stick.
No, I don't agree with you on that, Mr. Todd. It seems to me the federal question arises if the Florida Supreme Court, in its opinion, rather clearly says that we're using the Florida Constitution to reach the result we reach in construing the statute. And I think Blacker is a strong argument they can't do that.
Well, that they can never advert to their own Constitution?
Certainly it stands for the proposition you couldn't do it then, in those circumstances.
Well, what would it be, I wonder, about the circumstances here that would say that in reconciling these provisions, which at first we were told were mandatory, then we were told they're not mandatory, they give discretion, and now we're told that the real issue is simply, did the court, in putting a boundary on that discretion, do something federally impermissible? What would it be about that sequence that would implicate?
If the Supreme Court of Florida simply said, in its opinion, look, these sections of the statute conflict, we've got to, under our traditional principles, resolve it one way or the other. But it doesn't say that. It goes on to say, look, in the light of the Florida Constitution and the general rights conferred there, we're construing it this way.
It seems to me that as a tiebreaker, as a way of shedding light on the provisions that are in conflict, so long as it's not done in a way that conflicts with a federal mandate, they're not violating any.
I don't agree with that. I don't think that the Florida Supreme Court used the Florida Constitution as a tool of interpretation of the statute. If you look at its opinion, it's separated into various sections. Issues, legal opinions, division of elections, 5, the applicable law, Roman 6, statutory ambiguity, and 7, legislative intent. That's the section where they construe the statute in view of these ambiguities and so forth. That section concludes, under this statutory scheme, the county canvassing boards are required to submit their returns to the department by 5 p.m. of the 7th day following the election. The statutes make no provision for exceptions following a manual recount. If a board fails to meet the deadline, the secretary is not required to ignore the county's returns, but rather is permitted to ignore the returns within the parameters of this statutory scheme. So what the statutory interpretation gives you is a firm termination date of December 7th and discretion in the secretary. The opinion continues. Roman 8, the right to vote. The text of our Florida Constitution begins with a Declaration of Rights, and it goes on to say that to the extent the legislature may enact laws regulating the electoral process, those laws are valid only if they impose no, quote, unreasonable or unnecessary, close quote, restraints on the right of suffrage contained in the Constitution. In other words, I read the Florida court's opinion as quite clearly saying, having determined what the legislative intent was, we find that our state constitution trumps that legislative intent. I don't think there's any other way to read it. And that is a real problem, it seems to me, under Article 2, because in fact, there is no right of suffrage under Article 2. There's a right of suffrage in voting for the legislature, but Article 2 makes it very clear that the legislature can itself appoint the electors.
It seems to me that it's already been conceded that the legislature can delegate that function to the judiciary. And when Justice Kennedy asked if it can delegate the function to the judiciary, and that is what McPherson seems to suggest, then can it not delegate something less? That is, can it not give the judiciary a role of the sort that it's exercising here? After all, the legislature, and this is important, it's not true in every state, the legislature itself re-promulgates the Constitution every several years, and then it's ratified by the people.
Isn't there another way of looking at what the Florida court did, and that was, in effect, to apply the statute, the interpretive criterion, that where there is any discretion for interpretation, an unconstitutional result should be avoided. And because you have here a statute, as I understand it, that regulates both federal and state recounts, that much is, I think, is clear. The only way to avoid an unconstitutional meaning of the statute so far as Florida law was concerned was to get into this constitutional concern about preserving the franchise. And that because the legislature intended one standard to cover both federal and state recounts, it therefore is valid to consider the state constitution in order to derive a general meaning that will apply to a federal as well as a state election.
I fully accept that view, Justice Souter. I would supplement it with one important point. We're not dealing here with a decision in which, within the gray area where a court could reasonably go either way, this court simply said, we don't care about these federal considerations. It, in particular, exercised its equitable powers in favor of the petitioner in order to facilitate meeting the December 12 deadline while still being able to have electoral contests. That December 12 deadline comes purely from federal law.
But can you just go back to your characterization of the opinion? I think we'd all agree that given that the legislature has to select the manner, the state can't say our Constitution selects the electors. I suppose.
I think that's right.
Or the tweaking of this opinion, suppose the court had said, look, we reach our results based on the canons we found in Blackstone. Now, nobody's going to say they've said Blackstone selecting the electors, right?
I think that's
all right. Now, I suppose they said we reached this decision based on the values found in the Constitution. That would be like Blackstone. Suppose they say, well, the legislature wants us to do X, but our Constitution requires us to do not X. That might be different. Now, what is it that they've done here?
Well, I certainly don't think they've done the third. They did not say. I think when they underscored the presence of language that Justice Scalia read about what's mandatory, they were simply being candid about the fact that they were acting in conflict with one part of the statute, but the adjacent
section of the opinion, Professor Tribe, that is entitled "The Right to Vote." It is after the legislative intent section, and it says categorically, to the extent the legislature may enact laws, they're invalid. And I suggest perhaps the reason that the court did it is that, however expansive the doctrine of constitutional doubt is, there is no way that it can make December 7 mean anything except December 7. I mean, they were almost constrained to use the Constitution to override the firm deadline that was set forth in the
Justice Scalia, both you and I think at one point Justice O'Connor, in pointing to the particular dates that came out differently under the approach that this court used from what would have emerged if they had looked only at 102.111, are making a mistake, with all respect. It's not as though this court promulgated a rule for the future about December 7th. In commemoration of Pearl Harbor, we say December 7th is the day. No, what they did was say we have to find a date which will accommodate these conflicting statutory provisions and policies in light of what our Constitution tells us. And we surely, it would amaze, I would think amaze this court to see anyone saying that because an opinion was organized under Roman numeral heading.
Professor Trey, I don't know about you, but I'm getting a bad headache. We'll finish this up, thankfully. 12:57 at 560 QAM.
This is 560 QAM. Sports Radio 560 WQAM Miami, Fort Lauderdale. A Beasley Broadcast Group station. WQAM.com for the world.
It's a 1 to 2 hours.
More than an interpretive guide.
You would bother with it because having decided very clearly what the statute requires and finding no way to get around the firm date set, you say the reason it's bad is because of the state constitution. That's how it's written. No, but they might have tried it another way, but it seems to me they
also say that the provision that reaches the results of conflicts with the authorized recounts was written in 1951, that in 1989 they wrote a provision that unmistakably created discretion, and we haven't yet discussed this provision also created the provision that when the returns are filed late, it doesn't say throw them away, it doesn't say give them back, it says fine every member of the canvassing board $200 a day. That would be a totally crazy provision, as this opinion understands. If you were not to reach a reconciliation of this sort, this result was overdetermined under Florida law. It might be true that they said the Constitution also points this way, but there isn't a sentence in the opinion that suggests that without that constitutional argument, the result would have to be different.
What is the November 26th date? Is that the 7-day date moved, or is that some kind of a date that tries to reconcile the ultimate point after which the Secretary, in exercising her discretion, no longer has to accept the late returns? Did it move the date from the statute? Has it created a new date about this discretion? What is it?
Well, it looks to me like an exercise of the Chancellor's foot, as it were, in this particular case. When I saw the date, November 26th, I couldn't come up with an algorithm or a formula that would generate it, but the court was confronted with the task of drawing, as this court has recognized, what are sometimes inevitably arbitrary lines. That is, it said it was not consistent with the overall scheme of the statute to require these recounts, which had just begun, to terminate. That truly would be a promise to the ear to be broken to the hope, like a munificent bequest, just as Jackson said. And if the legislators will, why tell people to count if you won't count it? And if the legislature had
jumped into the breach and said this same thing, would that be a new statute, a new enactment? Under 5 U.S.C.
I honestly, Justice Kennedy, I'm not sure, because the language that I quoted from 3 U.S.C. Section 5 focuses on the institutional dispute resolution arrangement that is in place. And if you look at the legislative history in the decade of hearings in the period after the Hayes-Tilden debacle, that history focused on the importance of having a fixed tribunal which you could look to, rather than one cooked up at the last moment. And indeed, what they seemed to be most afraid of was the political entry of legislators and executives at the 11th hour. There was no focus at all.
But are you saying you can't tell us whether they, in the hypothetical, suppose that that would be a new enactment?
Well, there certainly are no cases on the subject. The language gives me very little guidance. Since the section is addressed to Congress, neither my opinion about it nor the court's opinion is necessarily...
You don't think you could tell us what you might advise the Congress if you were the counsel?
I think I would advise the Congress that it is not a new enactment, that it is an entirely reasonable construction of an existing enactment, as to which the only alternative construction is to make it self-destruct and to make it internally contradictory. And I honestly don't think, if I were advising Congress, that I would say it's a new construction. I do think also that some people reasonably could argue the contrary. And I think that this language should be interpreted whether by a court or by Congress in a way that gives some deference to the state government and its organs. And I think any degree of deference here is inconsistent with saying that there's been a federal violation. Especially when I want to remind us all about the context. Are we going to say that this paragraph in this opinion says that Florida is in breach of Article 2 of the Constitution in general? Hard to say.
There should perhaps be some deference, though, to the concept expressed in Article 2 that it is the authority of the legislature, and some special concern about what the legislature may have said.
Yes, but if the legislature is entirely happy not to completely delegate this power to the courts, which Article 2 would permit, but rather to allow the courts to exercise a somewhat more flexible role than the one that the critic of this opinion would be embracing, that's within the power of the legislature.
No, but who would have thought that the legislature was leaving open the date for change by the courts? Who would have thought that?
You just read the statute in 1989 and it says may. It says she may reject the
That doesn't change that's not the date.
No, the date is the one from which the may is measured. That is, you're supposed to get it in by 7 days later. What if you don't? Well, if you don't, she may, or she may not, reject them. Now, anybody reading that would realize that's a deadline only in a kind of Pickwickian sense. It's not a real deadline. She's got discretion. Certainly, if there's an act of God of the sort Justice Stevens asked about,
well, then the secretary came in and argued and said, yes, her discretion was if it were an act of God or a machine breakdown, she would exercise her discretion.
And it's an entirely normal exercise of judicial interpretation to say that this statute is not limited to God and machines.
Professor Trump, can I ask you why you think the Florida Legislature delegated to the Florida Supreme Court the authority to interpose the Florida Constitution? I mean, maybe your experience with the legislative branch is different from mine, but in my experience, they are resigned to the intervention of the courts, but have certainly never invited it.
Well, I have to say
the Florida Legislature affirmatively invited the Florida Supreme Court.
The odd thing is that the system in Florida involves their own repromulgation of the Constitution, and their scheme with respect to the resolution of disputes over elections draws a sharp distinction between elections to their own House and Senate, which they won't trust the courts with as far as they can throw them. Those are to be resolved exclusively in the House and Senate, and all others are to be resolved in the courts under a standard that they understandably
they are resigned to, but they need not be resigned to the Florida Supreme Court interposing itself with respect to federal elections. They need not be, because the Florida Constitution cannot affect it. And I just find it implausible that they really invited the Florida Supreme Court to interpose the Florida Constitution between what they enacted by statute and the ultimate result of the election.
Well, I suppose if they were at all far-sighted, if they looked at their own work and saw how self-contradictory it was, they might say we would want someone with the authority to reconcile these provisions, to do so in the light not only of their literal language, but of the fact that they're dealing with something very important, the franchise. The disenfranchising people, which is what this is all about, disenfranchising people isn't very nice. It wouldn't just violate the federal as well as the state constitution.
But wouldn't Justice Scalia's suggestion be a stronger suggestion if they had dealt by the statute only with federal elections, or only with a presidential election, as opposed to dealing with both state and federal in the same statute?
But it's not uncommon, given the convenience of having similar regulations apply on election day, and not to bifurcate. Oregon v. Mitchell.
Okay, I'm getting a worse headache. And here's the fact of this is my prediction is 6-4 for us. The only problem is that's 10. 6-4 last time I checked. I know we've been doing a lot of adding with numbers, but that sounds like 10.
I demand a recount.
However, the facts are, I think, got a good point. Rehnquist, Scalia, and O'Connor, for Bush, and Thomas he's got also for them, which is probably true. But you notice he hasn't said a goddamn word? He's busy smoking. And
because people are going to stab him in the eye if he opens up a mouth.
They're good point. Anyway, maybe there'll be a little more when we get done with the break, and maybe not, but whatever. I can't handle anymore. It's making me sick. 9 minutes after 1 at 560 WQN.
Get the best of Neil Rogers 2000. The benefits of Planned Parenthood. Just go to a Specs Music store near you or WQAM.com on the net. The best of Neil 2000 with great hits like...
Tell me the first thing that pops into your mind. What do you think this is?
Homo.
And this?
Lesbo.
Okay, and this one?
Infected Haitian.
How about this?
Bobby Valentine riding a baloney pony. Oh, those timeless classics. The best of Neil Rogers 2000 from Sports Radio 560 QAM.
It seems to me that it's very difficult to read the Florida Supreme Court decision as saying...
Oh, now we got Mr. Olson is back.
Other than
Jimmy Olson?
The Florida Constitution, in their view, in that court's view, is trumping everything else. The second paragraph of the conclusion says, because the right to vote is the preeminent right in the Declaration of Rights of the Florida Constitution, and so forth. This opinion is full of language.
Wouldn't they refer to the Declaration of the Rights of Man, to the 1789, the French Revolution? I mean, the right to vote is a value in the Constitution. Are they actually saying? I didn't see it.
They're saying
the statute means one thing, but the statute's unconstitutional because the Constitution of Florida says the opposite. I didn't see that.
I think that the only reasonable, fair reading of the decision is that the Florida Supreme Court felt that, and it says it over and over again, that we are going to attempt to discern the will of the people, the will of the electorate, and discern and enhance in whatever way we possibly can the right to vote. And because of that, these provisions of the statute, which are very much quintessentially legislative. The timetables that are involved in this statute, particularly the November 14th deadline, is a part of a composite package. There's 1 week for a protest and certain recounts to the extent that they can be done, and there are 4 weeks for contests. When the Florida Supreme Court when the Florida Supreme Court expanded the protest period from 7 days to 19 days, it necessarily limited the contest period to a shorter period of time. It changed the discretion. It allowed certain things to occur that couldn't have occurred, and it justifies all of those things on the grounds that the Florida Supreme Court, the Florida Constitution, trumps those legislative concerns. And that's why it said we're not going to be dissuaded by hyper-technical statutory considerations. So the court was doing what this court said in the McPherson versus Rocker case that it cannot do, is allow itself to insert itself or the Florida Constitution above what is required by Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution. It also seems to me quite evident in response to what Justice Kennedy was asking earlier that there was concern about the federal statutory provision. The language to which I think Justice Kennedy was referring is on page 32A of the appendix to the petition from the court's decision, and there's a footnote there that does refer to reference to 3 U.S.C. 1 through 10, which of course includes Section 5. And it says so in conjunction with the statement that the exercise of the discretion by the Secretary of State could not be done in such a way that would preclude Florida voters from participating fully in the federal electoral process. The court was assuming, it seems to me, that it was not conflicted. The decision it was rendering was not going to cause a conflict with the federal statutory scheme, and it was, we submit, in error in that regard. So to sum up with respect to this, the Florida Supreme Court radically changed the legislative scheme because it thought it could do so under the Florida Constitution. By doing so, it acted inconsistently with Article 2 of the Constitution and inconsistently with Section 5 of Title 3, and it has brought about precisely the circumstances that Section 5 of Section 3, Title 3, was designed to avoid.
If I look at this in the conclusion, the paragraph on page 37A, where they summarize what they said, there's nothing there about the Florida Constitution, it's only about the Florida Election Code. They say they must construe the Florida Election Code as a whole, and they point out the provisions in conflict. There's not one word in that paragraph that says anything about the Florida Constitution.
The very second paragraph refers to the Florida Constitution and the rights to vote. Page 36A of the appendix to the petition.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. The case is submitted.
The Honorable Court is now adjourned until Monday next at 10 o'clock.
Great. There you go.
And with that very abrupt gavel, the court adjourns as you hear, and 90 minutes of oral arguments presented to the United States Supreme Court in this particular and very history.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Frank. You're a real rocket scientist. So what do you think, George? Terminal.
Hey, there we go. Hey, y'all, my name is Clarence Eugene Thomas, President Bush's nominee for the Supreme Court. And you know, there's lots of people out there that think just I smoked a little marijuana when I was in college. Hell, it wasn't nothing but a pen joint. Well, maybe a cigar-sized joint. I don't remember y'all. And they don't think I'm fit to be on the Supreme Court. Yeah, I got the munch. Let's do this quick and get out of here. I want to set y'all straight. When I start reviewing the law, I don't just review the law. Hell, y'all, I'll be toking. And I toke it to the east, and I toke it to the west, and I toke it while I look up Sandra Day O'Connor's best. All right. I'll be toking. Let's go burn one, y'all.
Yeah, he must have been, because we didn't hear hide nor hear from him today. 119 at 560 WQM. I apologize for putting that dreadful crap on. Look at us. We don't have one call on the board now, because the whole audience, we don't have anybody listening either. But that's all right. Killed an hour and a half. And with my luck, lunch shows up right at the very end of this thing. Instead of like right at the beginning, that's because we called too late. We called too damn late. Thanks a lot, Stan and Sal and Pearl and whatever your name is. Scott. Scott and I know, and they're related to Ray Perry. Fine, come on, let's hear from all these experts out there. I personally thought that Todd Olson, the attorney for the Bush side, did a much better job than Lawrence Tribe, who I thought was weak. Weak. Now, maybe his argument was weak. I'm certainly no expert, and I can't make head nor tail of this damn thing. But I thought that the Bush attorney was much better, much stronger. Lawrence Tribe to me sounded like he was on the verge of like backing out. And this is supposed to be his strong suit. He's argued in front of the Supreme Court 60,000 times. Look at this. There isn't one person listening at this station now. 567-0560, pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon wireless line. We just made history. The first time in history we've had audio released from oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court, put it here on the air, and the whole audience disappeared. Our poll today, the election in Florida was fixed 217 out of 310 votes. That's 70%. Flawed, but only by accidental events. Wait a minute, it's recharging now. Flawed, 51, 16.3%. As honest as any other state, not doing too well, 42 or 13.5%. So I guess we round out today with music. Is that what we do, George? Because there ain't anybody listening. That was a bad judgment on my part. Yeah, let's play some music because nobody's got anything to say after all that. I thought that all these geniuses out there who understand the law and are much smarter than I am, I thought they'd be calling us right now, telling us, interpreting for us. Nobody. 567-0560, pound 560 on the AT&T and Verizon wireless line. Out-of-town line, 877-785. Aren't you shocked?
Why are you yelling? They're all full.
What do you mean they're all full?
All the ones that work, that is.
They're not they're not lit up in here.
Are you kidding me?
No. Oh, don't tell me this thing is screwed up again. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Talking to me?
That's you.
Okay.
I'm sitting here looking at the computer screen.
I'm about this court case today because I didn't get to hear very much of it. But I just wanted to say I think the election is not only fixed, it continues to be fixed. And when Jeb Bush said that people want him to give up on his, turn his back on his family, he was in effect saying that his father, the former president of the United States, wants the legislature to vote George Bush as president of the United States.
Right.
And I think that's an outrage.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if that's the case, if his father is supporting this legislative initiative, he ought to be ashamed of himself.
No, he ought to be impeached, not just ashamed of himself.
Well, he can't be impeached, but something's got to give about, people need to notice that this thing is just an outrageous conspiracy against, the democracy of this country. And I think that I know you don't have a whole lot of regard for Gore and Lieberman, but
no, I don't.
I'm going to tell you my opinion. I think that Gore is a hero of American democracy, and I really mean that. He's a hero.
Yeah.
Because he's standing up for democracy against this dictatorial thing that's going on in our state. And it's just a sickening thing to see.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I mean, I'm not going to say he's a hero, but I will give him credit for at least hanging in there because he knows that he won and that they're trying to steal it away from him. That the Bush family, and especially our governor here, I mean, just take a look at the whole thing. Look at the grotesque relationships here. Catherine Harris and Jeb Bush and a whole bunch of them, and Papa Bush and Cheney and Jim Baker. Oh, no, that could never happen in America. This isn't a banana republic. Right. Now, how can anybody who lives in South Florida say that? Okay, here's somebody on line 8 because our thing ain't working. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Am I on here with you now?
You're on, yes, sir.
I just want to ask you about this George W. and Jeb's wives. I had a discussion with a friend, and he says they're both American-born. Is that true?
Yes.
Jeb's wife is
the wives? No, Jeb Bush's wife is Mexican.
And George W.'s?
I know nothing about his wife. I assume so.
I thought George W.'s was Mexican.
I don't think so, no.
No, okay.
What difference does that make?
It was just a matter of a discussion. By the way, I'm heading out to Sawgrass Mills, and they usually have the radar set up on a perimeter road right by J.C. Penney's.
Okay, well, listen, don't forget Steak and Chase open now. I almost forgot all about that. 567. Also, don't forget the hockey games at 8 tonight. I misspoke before. It's on 8 o'clock because ESPN. which is very unfortunate. But nevertheless, at least there won't be any excuse people showing up there late tonight. Game's at 8 o'clock, Red Wings and the Panthers. Any interest?
No.
No. Here's line 2. Hello.
Is this me?
This is you.
All right, good. Hey, listen, thanks for putting this thing on. I went through the radio, and I didn't catch anybody else having it on. But
so then I did the right thing then.
Well, I appreciate it. You know, we disagree sometime, and I'm sucking up, I guess.
Well, I didn't put it on for partisan reasons because I didn't know what they were going to be saying, but I just put it on because I thought it was a public interest, and supposedly everybody's all whipped up about this.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Like I said, I'm out working in my garage, and I was able to hear it.
Right.
940 didn't have it, and whatever the one at the end of the dial there with Randy, none of them had it. So.
And you mean to tell me that even IOD didn't have it? The supposed all news channel?
I don't know. I don't even know what station that is, to be honest with you.
Wow.
Yeah, I started from 560 and kind of just scanned and got some Latin stuff.
And I was the only one. Well, thank God for me.
I appreciate it. But they might have had it in Spanish. I don't know. But we disagree sometimes on. We come from different sides on this.
Yeah.
And I want to give you my prediction.
Yeah.
You taking predictions today?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
Overs and unders?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I'll call Hank later. I think they're going to rule and in favor of Bush, and they're just going to go right back to boom, square one, December 7th, whatever it says there. I'm sorry, November 7th, whatever it says there. 7 days after, call it a day, wrap it up. That's my prediction.
Okay, we'll see.
Thanks.
We will see next week.
No
what day, huh?
Safest bet in the country.
Why do you say that?
Because it's still a state issue.
Well, who are you counting on? I mean, you got Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you got her, and you got Justice Stevens, that's 2. And you got, who am I leaving out? Kennedy, that's 3. You're counting on Souter, and I'm not too sure about him. You're counting on David Souter. But I guess it's going to be 5-4, I think.
They still have to justify it. I mean, they can't just do what they want.
What do you mean they can't just do what they want? They make a ruling and they write up a whole bunch of, just like you just got hearing.
The court saying the court is adjourned until Monday next. Do not read anything into that. Monday next, when the justices sit on other cases already scheduled before this court. We'll let you know when we know, but it's certain it's not going to be too long. Frank?
Well, as we heard the questions, clearly we won't hear the deliberations. How do they work?
How do they work? Well, the justices proceed to the conference room. That's the normal practice here. We're in a slightly abnormal situation, but what they try...
Yeah, it's amazing hearing all those people screaming and yelling. Like I said before this election, we had the worst choice maybe in the history of this republic. And now that it's all over with, now everybody's all whipped up to a frenzy about it. Because it's something to do, 27 after 1 at 560 QAM.
This is 560 QAM. The Neil Rogers Show. Sports Radio 560 QAM.
It's Friday, you bastard.
Coming to a theater near you. The legend of Bagger Vance.
Don't forget what to say before you hit that. Paper or plastic. You're good.
Matt Damon, as you've never seen him before, and Will Smith in his most heartwarming role ever.
Boy, you better not put those canned goods on top of those tomatoes.
The legend of Bagger Vance. Coming to a supermarket near you.
Clean up on aisle 11, please.
Completely possible, plausible that the court suddenly decide, look, this isn't a matter we should get into. This is a matter that should be left to the states. On the other hand, they may think that there's a sufficient constitutional argument, and for that reason it does belong to the United States Supreme Court. And then they move to the second question, whether or not the Florida Supreme Court violated the federal law or violated the Constitution. And if so, we go to sort of the third question, which the Supreme Court may never answer. It's really a matter for the parties. Is if they do find a violation, now what?
Okay, Greta, calm down. She's hysterical. Just like I am with this phone system. This place is just unbelievable. Nothing in here works for too long before it just finally craps out. But that's okay. Let's just let's not worry about that. Let's just put them on hold and, although there is nobody on hold except maybe one because they're all disappeared.
And, that other guy was absolutely right. Now, one of the other AM stations that basically had no programming on had the cojones to air that thing live. So
how could you not? Let me ask you, what have I always said about IOD? What kind of an all-news station doesn't put the audio on from the Supreme Court hearing? Well, what kind of crap is that?
I couldn't believe it.
What do they have on? What do they have, lard ass on? He wasn't there today.
They had his shill in.
And they didn't put the audio on?
No.
Oh my God! This is supposed to be his specialty. He's supposed to be the emperor of this crap.
Yeah, and I want to thank you. And when I thought that it was interesting that the way they attacked both
sides and see whose argument crumbles to the most number of pieces.
They just decimate everybody.
Yeah, it was interesting to see. That must be the way they go about doing it.
I guess arguments before the Supreme Court kind of like an S&M thing.
We'll take a look at them.
Yeah. Okay.
Souter. You know the word on Souter is?
What?
He's the laziest justice on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
He writes the least number of
yeah, but at least he spoke a little bit. Clarence was in the back puffing away.
I didn't see his ears flapping.
No, not a bit. Okay, have a great day. 56705. Oh, the smoke was coming out of his ears. I thought it was coming out of his... 5670560. Our computer is down here, but that's okay because it's WQAM, and we just do our best here to try to keep the thing floating along with our... oh, God. What a joke this place is. Now, what are these? Are they ringing? Are they on hold? What are we doing?
They're ringing. Just hit anything.
WQAM, hello.
Hello, is Neil around?
Sir, speaking.
Neil?
Speaking.
Oh, I turned my radio down. Listen, This is Neil Rogers?
It sounds like me, yeah.
Okay, well, listen, I just want to thank you very much for putting that on because, that was fantastic stuff. And one of the reasons I listen to you every day is because you've got such an extraordinary wit and level of intelligence you don't find on most of the other English-speaking stations.
Well, you can say that again. Well, how about on the foreign language stations, though?
Well, the other ones I don't understand, so I don't know what they're saying, but...
and you don't want to know, believe me.
I'm sorry?
I say you don't want to know.
No, probably not. But, again, I wanted to call in and say, hey, there's a lot of people out here listening to that, and that was amazing. I just love the way they can pick and slice and dice.
Yeah, that was it. Even Ron Popeil never sliced and diced the way the justices do. You're right. Okay, thanks a lot, pal.
All right, man.
Have a great day. See, there are people out there listening to it, even though our phone system's all screwed up, and this is a goddamn make-believe radio station. See, they just don't understand. The country is wrapped up in this. They don't care about some stupid ball game right now. The country is wrapped up in this crap, and except for a bunch of, degenerate gamblers out there worried about a point spread and the overs and unders, this is where it's at. This is what people are like, it's coming out of their pores.
We've been tearing inside the very heart and soul.
Oh, I can't stand him. He makes me ill. No, I can't. He's goody two-shoes. Frank says no. Real phony baloney. He's probably like, doing his dog. Who knows? WQAM.
Hey, Neil.
Yes, sir.
It's so discouraging trying to talk about the subject with coworkers or neighbors.
And why is that?
Well, it seems like either half of them they're parroting the Republican propaganda that, it's been counted, it's been recounted.
Yeah,
how many times he's going to count till he gets what he likes.
Right.
And then the other half,
well, that's the spin that they're putting out right from the beginning because they're terrified that if they actually do get them all counted, they know they're going to lose.
I know, but a lot of these dummies are buying it. And the other half are like, well, I'm so sick of it, I don't care who's playing it, and just
well, that's what they're counting on. They're playing the impatient, that card.
So they're wearing the people down, and they're just like repeating over and over just to get it into their heads. Hey, he's counted, he's recounted. Don't let him count anymore.
Well, they're still counting, man.
I know, but
maybe as of tomorrow morning, I think they'll be counting. I think the hanging judge in Leon County, he's going to get them counting again.
I hope somebody intelligent gets a hold of it.
Okay, good luck to us.
Okay.
And he said they're going to be counting till they're slap happy. Isn't that what he said? The supervisor of elections in Seminole County has conceded that she allowed 2 Republican Party operatives to correct 4,700 Republican absentee ballot applications so they would not be thrown out, court documents revealed Monday. A 132-page deposition taken of election supervisor Sandra Gore paints a picture of an informal small-town voting operation with few security checks or paper trails through the office near Orlando could play a key role in deciding the outcome of this election. In the deposition, Gore, an elected Republican who's held office since 1983, acknowledged that 2 representatives of the state Republican Party used the back room in her office for 10 days to correct the ballot applications. How do you like that? And these people here, the ones that were down imported, shipped in here, that were screaming about government and the sunshine and let us in and let's see what's going on. Let me read that sentence again. She acknowledged that 2 representatives of the state Republican Party used the back room in her office for 10 days to correct the ballot applications. She conceded that no one was ever allowed to correct applications in the past and that her staff assisted the GOP representatives by sorting Republican applications from Democratic applications, something else that had never been done before. According to the documents, Gore said her office didn't check the identification of one of the 2 men. Are you following this? And she told attorneys she still has no idea who he is.
It might have been Jeb.
Do you know who I think it was?
Hi, this is G. Gordon Liddy.
Yeah, that's who I think it is. Probably was eating rats in the back room. The men were not supervised while they worked, she said. It's like putting two people in a bank vault unsupervised and saying, don't touch anything, said Harry Jacobs, an Orlando area attorney and Democrat who's filed a lawsuit against Gore and other Republicans. It's a very cozy relationship they had with the Republican Party. Oh, this is just enough to make you want to barf. Where the hell is page 2 of this? One thing I hate about these faxes, they come in like, oh, look at that, I got page 1, page 3, page 4. Where the hell is page 2 here? Oh, here it is. The disclosures came through a lawsuit that, if successful, will throw out all of Seminole County's absentee ballots, at least 15,000, about two-thirds of which went to George W. Bush. If they were thrown out, still a legal long shot, it would be more than enough to overcome Bush's minute lead in Florida and hand the election to Gore, et cetera, and so on. The lawsuit, which could be one of Gore's best shots at winning, was moved Monday from Seminole County to Tallahassee after both sides agreed to the change. Oh, it just, yeah, they were working in the back room. She didn't even know who one of them is. He just came in, kind of like hung out for a while. 5670560, pound 560 on the AT&T Verizon wireless line, 138 at QAM.
This is 560 QAM.
Oh my God, your breath's so beautiful.
Those precincts are black, but we're not counting that. We'll throw those ballots away. We don't want no more counting dates, so what else can we do? They voted for a Jew. That won't do. Can't be harassed. Was ordered to happen. It can't stop the stall. The successful see, as Jeb told me, he called her all night long. Alrighty, those precincts are black. We're not counting that. Everyone go away. There ain't no canvassing, Big Daddy. You'd be well advised to stop counting if you don't want nothing to happen to you. God bless America.
142 at 560 WQAM. Don't forget this afternoon, this ad by the AFL-CIO in a Herald this morning, full-page ad, page 9B. Let our voices be heard, let our votes be counted. They invite all Florida citizens who care about their vote to join a rally 4 o'clock this afternoon at the Stephen Clark Government Center, 111 Northwest 1st Street in Miami. Okay? Also, getting back to the shenanigans with the absentee ballots in Seminole and Martin counties, Emma Smith, a deputy election supervisor in Martin County, said her office began noticing that many of the Republican forms coming into the office lacked the required numbers and that they were not processed. She said she and her colleagues first tried to contact the voters who sent in the incomplete forms, but as it got out of the crunch, we were no longer able to do that. We were really swamped. Rather, she said, as many as 500 forms were turned over to the Republican Party workers to fix. Ms. Smith said the decision was made by the election supervisor, Peggy Robbins. She said Ms. Robbins, a Republican, was out of the office this week and couldn't be reached, of course. I think she called someone at the state to discuss it first, but I'm not sure, Ms. Smith said, referring to the state elections office. We're very upset about this, said Jeffrey Schooley, the Martin County Democratic chairman. This is more than they did in Seminole. From what I understand, the Republican Party was allowed to take these request forms out of the supervisor's office, which kept no track of how many went out or how many went back in. How do you like that? And you call this an election? You think that there's any real way anybody's going to have any idea how many... Oh, you got to be kidding me. Here's a call from somewhere. Hello.
We love the Supreme Court. Right-wing rascals, you.
Okay, great. Have a great life. Here's a mobile in Delray Beach. Hello.
Now.
Yes, sir.
How you doing?
Okay.
I wanted to thank you for playing what is possibly the most important thing since you coming back on the air.
Yeah.
But,
what was that, token?
The thing that's shocking to me is that something you read about that article in Seminole County where they said that if these votes were thrown out, these absentee ballots, that is a long shot. How is it a long shot?
Well, I'm just reading from what they wrote.
It should be a slam dunk that those votes should be thrown out. And I voted for Gore, and I live in the state of Florida, and I think they should just take the whole state of Florida and dump it in the circular file.
Yeah.
Because there's too much crap that went on, and nobody's going to know what really ever happened. Throw it out. Whoever wins the majority of the electoral votes without the state of Florida is the winner, and case closed.
But you know that's not going to happen.
No, it won't happen. That's the only way to remedy this.
That's why Jeb and the legislature are scurrying with this special session on Tuesday so they can appoint their own slate of 25 electors to make sure that they get him up there for Bush.
Yeah, and now, you know, nobody, I mean, he hasn't been interviewed yet, but I can't wait until he is and somebody holds his feet to the fire. This is a guy who campaigned about, I trust the states and I trust them to make their own decisions and I trust the people, and now he is federalizing everything he can possibly federalize.
Right, that's right, you got it.
He's just a scumbag.
Okay, good luck to you, pal. See you at the airport.
See ya.
Okay, the international thing. 5670560. Oh, what's Greta saying?
But there's a lot of action today here. After a 90-minute oral argument, audio tapes will release. This is a very historic moment. The Supreme Court has never allowed audio tapes being released on the same day as the actual argument.
The Florida Supreme Court.
Oh, no, we don't want to hear that again. Okay, we heard it all. Once was enough, thank you. I'd rather see that damn Isuzu on the way to Tallahassee again than hear it again. Here's Cutler Ridge. Hello.
Hey, Neil. How you doing?
Okay.
Hey, thanks for playing that, and if you don't mind, I'd like to express an opinion after hearing it. I don't think there's a chance of Bush winning it, and I have three reasons for that.
Yeah.
One would be they're saying that the courts in Florida don't have the right to resolve statutory differences with the constitutional differences in this state. And basically that would be like the Supreme Court setting a precedent where they can't resolve federal statute differences with the U.S. Constitution. So they're not going to go that way. Second would be the line of questioning even indicated where they said, you're saying the legislature sets all the rules and the court has to be out of it, yet in Article 15, or Section 15 it says the Congress should resolve all disputes, yet you're asking us to do it. So on one hand you say the courts have to stay out of legislative matters. On the other hand, you're saying you want this court to get involved in the legislative matters. You're destroying your own argument. And
yeah, but I'll guarantee you, at least I would bet a lot of money on it. Rehnquist, Scalia, and O'Connor, those three for sure, are going to go with Bush. Guaranteed.
And the final thing is I think he might have made a huge mistake by filing the case anyway, because now he had it all set up where the legislature was going to get the electors in there.
Right.
But now he's raised the issue before the court, before they even had a chance to make their move. And the court could actually step in and say, you know what, the legislature just can't supersede the Supreme Court of the state of Florida. And that's a dangerous thing for them to do, for the Bush camp.
Oh, hey, I'm going to tell you, if they go ahead and do that, there's going to be war in this state. You can just smell it.
And by the way, I'm a conservative person. I've never voted for a Democrat in my life for a president of the United States until this year. I was disgusted that the Republican Party chose such an incompetent boob as their candidate. If they'd chosen somebody with any decency, I would have voted Republican, but I cannot in good consciousness vote for George W. Bush, and I did not.
I mean, the whole thing is so transparent. You know, the Bush family and Cheney and Powell and all of these people, this whole clan of people who want to take over the reins of government, and they put him up as the face man, and people are stupid enough to buy into it. It's just mind-boggling.
I mean, there are thinking conservatives out there.
But he ain't one of them.
We're not hearing from a lot of them. But there are thinking conservatives out there. Do they really want this guy with his finger on the button telling us what to do?
Yeah, but don't forget, somebody would have to show them where it is first.
You're right.
Have a great day, pal.
Bye.
Thanks. Oh, there's a bright guy anyway, who's at least honest enough to say this guy's a moron. And you know what? I think he's got a good point.
This is 560 QAF, The Neil Rogers Show. Sports Radio 560 QAF.
Emphatically he denied he was resting his mind. He ain't gonna feeling a thing. He ain't gonna feeling a thing. So yeah, ever did. George pushed you back when he was a kid. It was a favorite thing. More than from me. He wants the White House to be all here like a big fat rich guy. So he can live in, he feels like this. Like come for the best time of his life. That's the way it's all. Out of noise for the throw that he denied it today. George Bush, you will never get him to stay.
152 at 560 WQAM 5670560 pound 560 on the AT&T line. Our poll today on neilrogers.com, and you can vote on this all weekend long. The election in Florida was, we gave you three choices. As honest as any other state. Not doing too good with that one. 13.1%, 46 votes out of 350. Pretty weak. Flawed, but only by accidental events. 62, 17.7%. Still pretty weak. Fixed, 242, 69.1%. See, there's that 69 again keeps popping up on this perverted show. Every time I take a poll, it comes out something 69. Here's somebody on line 6. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Neil, every time they have a coup in this country, we have the Cubans involved. What's with that?
The Cubans involved, you mean like Mayor Pinga Pequena?
Yeah, what's with him? I read in the New York Times this morning he's up in Tallahassee cutting deals with the Republicans. I thought he was a Democrat.
Well, he's becoming a Republican. Did you read that too? It's the same article.
Oh, is he changing over?
He's a comedian. He's changing colors. In fact, I hear he's going to become Colombian next week. That's what I'm hearing. And what about Juan Mendieta? He's got a little Cuban in him. Here's Boca. Hello.
Hey, Neil. How's it going?
Okay.
Okay, I have a question and then a request.
Yes, sir.
First one is the constitutional law is a pain in the ass. I had no idea, who was winning and who was getting their...
No, I haven't got any idea what they said. It was fascinating, but I haven't got any idea what they were saying.
Is there any reaction, at least by the know-it-alls?
Not really, because they keep telling you this. Well, don't try to anticipate the decision based on the questions.
Okay, and is there
although Greta and Roger Cossack both seem to think that the court is going to turn Bush down.
Okay, and is there going to be any more arguments heard, or is that that?
That's it.
Okay, and my request
in fact,
is...
those are the oral arguments I hear Monday. They may be accepting the anal argument.
Yes, that's the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And the request is, could you close out the show with Georgie Jr. as a piece of Schmidt?
Okay.
All right.
And have a great day. Oh, that would be bad to play that. I'm sure that's pissed off a lot of the Bush people along the way as we've been playing that because it's pretty damn, and too bad.
George Bush Jr. is a piece of shit. George Bush Jr. is a piece of shit. George Bush Jr. is a piece of shit. Georgie Jr. is a piece of shit. He's a rich spoiled brat and a cocaine junkie. What's he gonna do with all that campaign money? He don't give a crap about people going hungry, but don't confuse them with the facts. Oh, we can't find your rap sheet, it just disappeared. We're looking all over and it still ain't here. Hey, Georgie Jr., where's your rap sheet go? Are you afraid that we'll find out that you did blow? You were a rich college kid, a token party punk, and you got pitched for possession of drugs. By a rich bitch like you can hire a judge to get some Ajax blender and a big fat sponge. George Bush Jr. is a piece of shit. George Bush Jr. is a piece of shit. George Bush Jr. is a piece of shit. Georgie Jr. is a piece of shit. One more time. George Bush Jr. is a piece of shit. Come on. George Bush Jr. is a piece of shit. Yes, George Bush Jr. is a piece of shit. Georgie Jr. is a piece of shit.
Okay, 156 at 560 WQAM. Here's Wellington. Hello. Wellington. Going once. Long gone. Here's North Miami. Hello.
Hey, Neil, first time, long time.
Yes, sir.
A little thing on this going on with the ballots up there in Seminole County. Now, if her deposition does not get suppressed in the courtroom, it's over. They will get tossed out because that is violation. That's a direct violation of federal law.
Yeah.
There is no way that
Georgie
Jr. and his gang of thieves can hide that one. I mean, I can't see it.
This is going to be some weekend, you know what?
It's going to be fun.
In fact, I bet you the streets are going to be empty all weekend. Nobody will be leaving the house. Everybody will be... That's it. They'll be glued to the TV all weekend.
Yeah, well, then we'll have to see what happens Monday. But with the Supreme Court business, the way they were questioning Bush's attorney seemed like they weren't buying it. You know, it seems like they weren't buying it, but like they said, you can't really tell what they're thinking with the way their questions, but it looks like they're leaning a little bit more towards Gore, but who knows what they're going to decide.
That's except for Rehnquist and Sandra Gay O'Connor.
Yeah, the Three Stooges, you know, they're in Bush's pocket anyway.
You bet. You got it. Okay, good luck to
all right, have a good one.
You too. Yeah, you can't see them on TV because obviously they were showing pictures of them as they were asking the questions, the justices. But you could just envision Rehnquist with that big, like I said yesterday, unlike the black robes that the other justices wear, the big red robe with the round swastika on the belt, on the belt buckle. You'll see that on Rehnquist.
So speaking of a big weekend.
Chancellor Rehnquist. Yes, sir?
My appearance tomorrow?
Oh, that's right. It's appearance tomorrow.